Good morning. Good morning and welcome. My name is Giovanni Nisato. I work at Inlecom Commercial Pathways, and I'm here on behalf of the PRECINCT Consortium and its project manager, Jenny Rainbird, who unfortunately cannot be here with us today and sends her greetings. Today is day 2 of the conference. I'd like to open with some thoughts and some things that were striking me yesterday, and hopefully also to jolt your memory and to get you back in the present moment. So thank you for being here again on time. We have a short but very intense project this morning, program this morning. Just a couple of things that I was thinking about looking at all of you. So one of the first points is that we have an unusually high concentration of experts at European level, with 8 European projects represented. So I hope that nothing goes wrong, because otherwise Europe will miss on the next generation of innovation for security. So that's just to say it's a very high level panel that we have here with all of you present. One of the themes that was recurrent yesterday was the theme of building trust. And it's actually not completely obvious, because one of the points was, well, we need to have more info sharing, more information sharing, information, not data, information. And that's not obvious in an area where a strategy of security that's recurrent is security by secrecy or obscurity. So it's not an obvious challenge to meet, and actually one of the challenges that all of us are meeting somehow in our projects. Now, this information sharing has a couple of different dimensions, and one dimension is human to human. So yesterday we had a beautiful example. We were talking about hybrid threats, and we had to do some semantic disambiguation live. What do we mean by hybrid threats? That's not a light thing, because again, all of you are experts, so that points to there's still a little bit of work to be done in spite of tens of years already in the field, not to be taken lightly. Then there is human to machine. Do we understand what the machine is telling us? And we need that because the explosion of data requires us to interact with machines so that we can be smarter humans, so we can filter noise. That means we need to understand what the machine is telling us. We also need to have the machine to understand what we tell it. So, for example, what is an attack? What is a physical attack? What do we understand as resilience? So some of this terminology might be actually missing at European level in taxonomies or control vocabularies. So if we want to have interoperability between humans and machines, that's perhaps one area we can continue working on. And thank goodness there are works in this direction in several of our projects, also in standardization. About the point of transparency, not total transparency, but information sharing, correct information sharing, that points also, as several you've mentioned, to a certain kind of culture change. And it's easy to talk about culture change, but when the incentives are aligned against a change of behavior, we just talk about it. So what are the incentives that we can look at that can bring us to the more desired state of a certain level of information sharing? There are some directives that will have to be implemented. And again, it's a topic for discussion today. And we also had a beautiful call for action from Natalia yesterday, Natalia Miolato, saying, well, we need your expert input so that we can do better regulation, not just regulation for regulation's sake, but regulation that can help the entire field move forward. So that's, the ball is squarely on the camp of the experts now for this. So another thought that maybe we can take home. And today we can continue on some of those topics because we have a wonderful keynote speaker that is right in the middle of it all. So I'm very excited to hear his keynote talk. We will have a panel discussion after that, a coffee break. I'm sorry, but it's going to be getting out of the room, getting the coffee, and getting back in. It's 10 minutes coffee break, as you know, is very short. So we can continue with the following section and then end at 1 o'clock because a lot of you have to catch a plane. So that's the program we have for today. So thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure to introduce Yannis Kiadaresis. I don't think he needs an introduction because a lot of you already know him. He's at DG Home and he's area coordinator for strengthened security and innovation. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here with us today. It's just next. Yes. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for the excellent introduction, Giovanni. It's my great pleasure to be here with all of you today. I've noticed that we have some virtual participants as well via Zoom. I want to say good morning to everybody. My name is Yannis Kiadaresis. I'm a policy officer and the area coordinator of the area of strengthened security research and innovation for security, which is an horizontal cross-cutting part of our work program in Cluster 3 in Horizon Europe, in the Civil Security for Society part. And my role focuses more on how to focus and how to strengthen security research, how to foster innovation uptake, and also to find ways to be more impactful, I would say, not only technological, but also societally and in other domains. So allow me to start my keynote with a sort of presentation at then and now, how EU-funded security research evolved throughout the years. So from 2004 and the preparatory action for security research, as you can see here, at the time, the strategy was at the EU level more industrially potentially, it was to support industry and to be more on top-notch technological development. And then throughout the years in 2007, we've moved to the framework program number 7 on the develop further technologies. So again, technology was at the center of our research program. Then we moved to 2014 and Horizon 2020 at the time, where the understanding of detecting, preventing, detaining, preparing, and protecting against security threats was inserted for first time. So this change, I would say, was there to show this change of paradigm. So from 2007 until 2020, the EU has invested nearly 3 billion euros for more than 700 projects in security research. And this had led to areas where on airport scanners, advanced forensic technologies, first responders such as firefighters to be supported with new tools, innovative tools, and to tackle online radicalization, but also to methods to gather electronic evidence. So a very diverse area of funding to support our policy priorities and policy implementation with operational validation. So when we are talking about security research, is not theoretical research, but is, as we say, applied research based on the requirements of the end users. However, a number of challenges, as I'll show you in a bit, and hardless, very specific to the nature of security domain, actually contribute to broaden the gap between research and the market. That's why today I would like to focus my presentation more on innovation uptake and how all these innovative solutions that are developed under research, how we can transfer them to the market, but also to the hands of the final users. So here is the continuation of the historic timeline with the EU agenda on security in 2015 and the EU to respond to security threats, complex threats. Brussels attacks and Paris attacks happened at the time, so this changed a lot of the paradigm. And increased the resilience of critical infrastructure became more complex, one of the most complex challenges in the EU, but also protecting the citizens. So throughout the years after 2020 in the Security Union strategy, while member states remain predominantly responsible for building the resilience of detecting, preventing, and responding to these threats, to complex threats, actions at EU level to support and complement national efforts have been undertaken. So as you have seen the policy framework, lately we have adopted a directive for critical entities resilience, which is actually as of December already adopted, and now we're working on the implementation. And also on October 5th, the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the 5-point plan to continue enhance preparedness and reduce vulnerabilities throughout those complex threats and to increase resilience of critical infrastructure. Of course, I won't go into the details now in my presentation, but I'm more than happy to discuss it maybe later on the presentation, on the panel discussion. But these exchanges fed into the preparation of the proposal for recommendation to support member state, recommendation and council conclusion later, to antagonistic threats and to strengthen cooperation between resilience on critical infrastructure. So as the Security Union identifies the protection of critical infrastructure that your project is focusing more as one of the key priorities of the EU and its member states for the coming years. So specific reference is established to the growing interconnectivity of all these emerging and complex threats. Here is a very brief snapshot of the EU-funded security research part, I would say. As I mentioned, from 2014 to 2020, under Horizon 2020, 1.2 billion was spent with 340 security research projects. And now in Horizon Europe, we have on 1.6 billion, so a slightly increase in the budget, and we are currently foreseen for civil security research covering areas such as fighting crime and terrorism, disaster resilient societies, critical infrastructure protection, border management, cybersecurity, and also the area that I'm coordinating, the strengthened security research and innovation. So here you can see clearly, yes, a civil security innovation ecosystem, as we say, in the European Union. So at the epicenter of the slide, you can see the EU security R&I funding, which is our work program, right? And then we have 4 key pillars that are developing other tools, such as from the right-hand side, tools such as pre-commercial procurement tools that we have, calls for PCPs, but also standardization. On impact, you could see terms of reference that we have signed as DG Home with Frontex and EU-LISA, synergies with other funds to create this pipeline connection between the different funds, from Horizon Europe to ISF, Internal Security Fund, Border and Visa Instrument, but also CCEI, which is the Custom Control Equipment Fund. And then new, as I mentioned, ISF, BMVI, and CCI, but also other type of funds, such as Technical Support Instrument, Digital Europe for more procurement funds. Then the third pillar is community networks of practitioners, but also the Community of European Research and Innovation for Security, CERIS, that I hope you are very much aware. I will have a slide later on this, and different users and projects, such as the one that we have today, with all kind of events with a variety of themes and topics that we discuss with experts on how to make our research more impactful, but not only technologically speaking, but also at a policy level. And then the Innovation Hub and the Security Research Event is one key tool. Then finally, knowledge. We are launching studies throughout the years. The study on EU security market, which was a very big piece of, I would say, it was a big effort to understand the particularities of security market and to take a concrete knowledge with macroeconomic data to measure the area. And then the study on uptake factors, on innovation uptake, to understand better the factors that are influencing innovation uptake from influencing while hindering or fostering innovation uptake. Both studies are available in our website, so I suggest that if you're interested, I can show you more. Then here, the impact of EU-funded security research and innovation. So knowledge and value creation. And this is inherited to research and innovation. But what is the ultimate objective? According to the treaty, but also to the legislation, is the protection of citizens, society, and economy, as well as Europe assets infrastructure and services, its prosperity, political stability, and well-being. But our biggest challenge here to make this happen is innovation uptake. And that's why I have chosen the topic of this presentation to be innovation uptake today, because do innovative technologies and knowledge get to the market and to the hands of the people that are protecting our citizens? And are these innovative products acquired and deployed on the field? These are questions maybe for later. The full characterization of these specific factors, security-specific factors, could be an invaluable support for ongoing and future EU-funded security research. And by measuring all these factors affect different stakeholders in each research project. So it really depends on the specificities of each project. The security policy priorities will need modern capabilities to enable innovative technologies, and the investment needs to be aligned with such priorities to ensure that there is capacity to produce, but also to ensure that the capacity is followed by willingness and commitment to buy, because it's very important in order to have innovation uptake. So according to our analysis, there are some factors inherent to civil security market that hinder innovation uptake, from fragmentation. And here fragmentation stands for geographical fragmentation, but also market fragmentation in different levels, European, national, regional level, to market visibility from the responsible authorities, cultural barriers that exist, industry dynamics, analytical frameworks that they are divergent from each other, ethical, legal, and societal constraints, economic factors, synergies with other beneficiaries, but all with other programs as well. And then programming, which, as I mentioned before, is crucial for the pipeline connection between research and implementation and procurement at a later stage. So there are some challenges, as very briefly as I explained, but there are structural market conditions that prevent us for uptake of innovation. So I mentioned briefly market fragmentation, an institutionalized nature of end users and demand side, cultural factors such as risk aversion that we will, of course, speak more, I guess, in the panel discussion later on, but I wanted to start and to initiate this reflection maybe. And security projects are also extremely difficult to track their success due to long project timelines versus rapidly evolving threats and events, difficulties sustaining collaboration after the project life cycle, a lack of mechanism of internal communication and exploitation support, but also a lack of direct correlation between one project and one product in the market, because this is not often the case. Sometimes we're talking about different portfolio of projects for a product. And then finally, confidentiality requirements. So all this strategy, everything that we are doing, it follows, as we say, or we aim to follow a capability-driven approach and this forward-looking mentality in our strategic planning, and how we can be better prepared when we address current and future security challenges. We identify first, we try together with the end users, with security authorities, with citizens, with policy stakeholders to identify the needs. Then research plays a very important role for the development of the technology or of the solution. Then we assess the options, and in the end, we implement, and then procurement is the last stage. So we move, this is the aim, to move from a reactive to a proactive approach in our planning, but also in our implementation of the security program. And we move based on foresight, prevention, and anticipation of future challenges and threats. So by enabling police authorities, for example, or border guards, first responders to identify and develop those capabilities that they need for the future, research and innovation is crucial. And to use the adequate funding instruments to acquire all these innovative solutions at the end. Why should consortia aim for successful innovation uptake? Because successful innovation uptake can pave the way for various tangible benefits, providing international interdisciplinary collaboration opportunities to contribute to societal goals, but it's important to attract new talents, to foster innovation, to improve access to funding on different varieties of funds, on procurement funds, and in the end of the day, to show real impact and not to stay at research level, but also to move to the market. And then, of course, policy impact to improve shaping of the future legislation, as I mentioned before. Why this is not happening? It's not happening because we have different roles and responsibilities. Who takes the lead for innovation uptake? That's one big question. For processes, for specific research results, but also how the ownership of IP, of intellectual property, is managed throughout the project. The consortium agreement is not enough, unfortunately, for this. So specific deals or specific MOUs might be sometimes signed. So also another problem is the wrong identification and packaging on what is proposed for uptake after the project. And then finally, there is confusion between customers and user partners. Who is relevant in the process? And I urge you to clarify these things from the very early stage of the project, sometimes even from the proposal stage, so you don't have issues at a later stage in the development cycle. So my piece of advice is it's very important to dedicate the right effort and time to exploitation and to have uptake of research results at one of the top priorities, because it's really important to show some impact and uptake of your solution afterwards. And then finally, I'll close with this slide on capability-based uptake for civil security. From a capability-based approach, as I mentioned, moving from national or EU capabilities that they need to be assessed by the practitioners to a civil security research and innovation scheme throughout the project, from research and innovation action, but also PCPs and pre-commercial procurement. Then the options are either to move to support to supply-driven innovation or support to demand-driven innovation for civil security, either through EIC, the European Innovation Council, or the previous SME instrument, public or private capital or grants to innovators, but also on the demand side, we have the EU security funds, home funds, like ISF, BMVI, and CCI for tax-sud, for customs, and national funding, of course. And all these are leading to testing, integration of the technologies, and finally procurement. And this is the SERI's webpage that I mentioned before, the Community of European Research and Innovation for Security, that I welcome you to register. And to register to receive our newsletters and our news for events and different kind of workshops to train the community. As we say, sharing knowledge, learning about innovative security solutions, network, and more. And I see here is my colleague, Sebastian Seriak, who is the new infrastructure resilience coordinator from DG Home in the Commission. Good morning, Sebastian. And I'm looking forward to the open discussion later on, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite to the podium Mark Miller, who is going to lead he's also going to participate in the upcoming panel discussion on innovation uptake for critical infrastructure protection. I would also like to invite Isto Matila, who's the R&D director at Laurea University, and apologies if I mispronounced that. And he's also CEO at Disitor Limited. And I will also be taking part in this panel discussion moderated by Mark, and I will be trying to keep time just to make sure people have time for a coffee. Is that all right?
I'm going to stand. So we have an exciting panel now. It's always fun to get an opportunity to share some interesting and controversial ideas. First of all, I have to say something about my red shoes, because every time I have a project, everyone is asking, Why am I wearing red shoes? Well, it is something that comes from my jazz musician moonlighting. But before I get into that, and before we get into all the details of everything we're doing today, let me tell you a little story. Maybe you've heard this story before, maybe you have not. It's the idea of what and where does the word hacker come from? So maybe if you've heard it from me before, please excuse the explanation, but as you can see, I had the word hacker on my hat. The word hack actually goes back to the 1950s and early 1960s at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And it was coined as a term for a practical joke that was played on someone or a group of people that did not cause any harm or any hurt. So for example, when I was there in 1987, we did a practical joke on Harvard University. Our practical joke on Harvard University was to actually blow up a balloon in the middle of their football pitch. Of course, it's American football. And during the middle of a football game between Harvard and Yale, which was their big rival at the time. And of course, when that happened, it was in the newspapers and everything else. But the word hack, since the 1950s and 1960s, has actually been misappropriated for the cybersecurity world. And it has been added all kinds of negative connotations to it. But the original idea of the word was a practical joke that doesn't have any negative consequences. So I leave you with that idea, and I jump into the topic of today, which is innovation uptake. Now, as the moderator and as also a speaker, I take the opportunity to speak first. And I take the opportunity to share my, let's say, controversial ideas first. I and the companies I've worked for, and even my own company, have been part of the European Commission funding programs since 2004. We've gone through projects in supply chain security. We've gone through projects in detection of chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological, and explosives. We've gone through projects related to cybersecurity. We've gone through projects related to critical infrastructure protection, and even projects related to health and customs requirements. One of the interesting features of those projects is we always wanted to make an impact. And I think that innovation uptake is one of those impacts that sometimes is very, very hard to measure. I think as Giannis has mentioned, sometimes you take bits and pieces from one project, bits and pieces from another, and in the end, you end up with something which can be very interesting, but then it's hard to say, this innovation came exactly from that project. Therefore, the money that was spent by the European Commission and by the European Union on that had exactly that impact. Unfortunately, it's very, very hard to do that. There are a number of cases in the history of what I've been doing and what the companies I've worked for have been doing. And by the way, I probably should have introduced myself. I'm the chief executive of Conceptivity, which is a Swiss security think tank. I'm also the vice chairman of the European Organization for Security, which is the security industry organization, of course, here in Europe. I'm also the vice chairman of the European Cybersecurity Organization, and I'm a board member of the Trust in Digital Life Association. And in addition to that, I'm also the chairman of the, at this point in time, I think we're no longer a task force, but it's the Artificial Intelligence Task Force of the European Organization for Security. So that gives you a little bit of background of that. But coming back to the uptake of innovation, The challenge of being able to measure this impact is something that has caused a lot of concern, because obviously there's a lot of money that's coming from European Commission and European Union sources to try to address different aspects of security. And today we're here to talk about critical infrastructure protection. The whole idea that is coming out of this is, how is the best way to do this? And I would contend that there are three parts to this equation. And the three parts are this. First of all, you have to have the innovation itself. So you've got to do something that is new and different and quite challenging. And I would contend that for PRECINCT, we do have something there. One of the elements which is very interesting and I think very challenging is also when it comes to looking at the systems that are involved and how to connect them in a coordinated fashion, how to share information. And this is one of the innovations which is sitting right in front of us. Also, the whole idea of being able to have digital twins. And I think that is something that, yes, it's been done in different applications, but we have a challenge here within PRECINCT to make this something that is actually viable. Secondly, you need to have a willingness on the part of the market. And sometimes, that's a key point, the market has to recognize this is an innovation. We want to buy this. We want to use this. And the other part of this equation is actually a push. So the market is a pull, but the third part, which I contend is very important, is a regulatory component. Quite often, one of the things that happens is that in order to get market take-up or take-up of innovation, if there is a regulatory driver, meaning there is a directive, a European directive, or a European requirement to address an issue in a very specific way, this will also drive innovation uptake. I think that we have a lot of challenges going into the future. Unfortunately, I've seen quite a number of projects myself personally where we were not able to get, let's say, innovation uptake, but perhaps, and that's another key point, some of the elements of those projects, some of the elements that were resulting from innovations that happened, eventually made their way into the marketplace. So in the grand scheme of things, the future looks potentially bright, but we do have a long way to go and we have a lot of challenges. So rather than me continuing to speak about all of these things, I think we're going to now step and allow the colleagues who are also on the panel to speak a bit about the same topic, and then we'll come back to a panel discussion. So I will yield the floor. Actually, Janice, you've already spoken, so I'm going to actually go to Isto and ask Isto to make his initial opening remarks, and then we'll come back to Giovanni, and Giovanni will then make his opening remarks, and then we will continue with the panel discussion. Thank you.
So, good morning, everybody. My name is Isto Mattila. I'm working as a R&D director in Laura University. It is in Finland, Helsinki area. Before coming to the university life, I was working 6 years in European Commission, and before that I was working for Finnish Coast Guard. I'm a Captain Navy in my previous job. So I concentrate a little bit to the maritime this time, because I'm leading the big Arctic R&D project, Horizon 2020 project, which is called AI Arc. This is something what we talk today quite close, which is innovation, new innovation to the Arctic. We are building kind of a network of the seafarers to the Arctic because the conditions are changing. Because the conditions are changing, European citizens or companies and businesses has to see how they can operate in the future in the Arctic conditions. And one of the main questions is how to share the information about the difficult conditions over there. It is foreseen that traffic between Europe and China is going to be open through the Arctic around 30 years time of now, 25, 30 years now, if the warming is continuing as it is today. So that means that the whole business in maritime, where we are fully dependent in Europe, is going to have a crucial change in this world. Time between the China ports and Europe will go 2-3 weeks shorter, and each day of each vessel, big vessel, is 1 million euros per day. So you can think about where the companies are putting their big vessels to go, not to the Suez Channel, they go to the Arctic. Problem is that the Arctic is empty. There's only ice today. Tomorrow there's only open water. There's no infrastructure of safety and security at all. There's no cooperation between authorities at all. There's no vessels who can operate in icy conditions. So we are going to see a lot of change. And because we are working in the Commission, I was working in the Commission before about the information sharing, we made an innovation about how to build up security and safety in a new level. And this new level means that because you are alone over there in the Arctic, you need to have a friend if you have a problem. That means that the vessels need to meet each other. They need to know where they are. They need to see what is the kind of security equipment on board in order to survive in the conditions which are very, very cold in case of accidents. Otherwise, we will see dramatic things over there. That's why we made an innovation, which is that every seafarer, every coast guard, every business can be kind of connected to each other. Why this hasn't been done before? It is the reason that there is no communication in the Arctic. There's no means in technical point of view that you can talk to each other. But in recent years, the satellite companies have been building the capacity that in coming years, they are fully fledged kind of a communication possibility between seafarers. And that means that you are able to build up some kind of a network of travelers over there. The innovation what we made, it was the virtual control room, which means that everyone over there can have a computer-based awareness picture. Awareness picture is telling where the capacities are, where the help is situated, who can be in your problem situation, and when they are able to come. All these things what we have every day in our existing sea areas, like here in the Helsinki, front of the Helsinki or in Mediterranean. Thing is that in Arctic it was impossible, but now it's going to be a kind of a future, and we will test this new capacity this year in my AI Arc project. Innovation is there. We have a nice, fine consortia, but what is coming after the project? That's something what we talk today, I guess. It is something interesting to think about how these things are going to be put to the reality. We can test it, we can show it, but there's no commercialized product for anyone. So does it mean that the 7 million euros what my consortia is spending is going to the trash? Or are we able to build up something for this money for the end users and stakeholders over there? I like very much the opening speech about different strategies. There are one strategy you missed, European Maritime Security Strategy, which was 1 year before the European strategy. Maritime Security Strategy was meant to work together somehow in the challenges which are linked to the maritime. And these strategies, that was the first one, other ones came afterwards, they all show that indeed we can regulate, we can talk about the strategies, but where is the problem, in my point of view, is a little bit how to implement them together between the member states. Maybe I stop here because otherwise I speak all day, so we can go to the little bit more details later on.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Isto. Giovanni, please, your opening statement.
It's always exciting to be the last to speak on this kind of panel because it puts the challenges at the higher level. So just for clarity, the position from which I'm speaking now, it's actually quite humbling. I am a one-person consultant in the innovation field. So maybe for clarity, I'm speaking now from my own experience as somebody who helps for a living companies in the field of innovation and was actually starting still in this area somehow. One of the first challenges I find is that the word innovation means about 10 different things for one person. So when you have several people talking about innovation, one of the first challenges is what are you talking about? So the operational definition that I use for my own company, which is called Innovation Horizons, I thought it was important because since innovation is part of the name, I wanted to tell people what I mean by that. And to me, innovation is something that has an impact on society. And typically it's through a new product, a new market, a new service. And because of the nature of the society we live in, typically there's a business associated with it. But I'd like to take that into the context of what we're talking about now, because to me, innovation and uptake, it's the same thing. If there's no uptake, there's no innovation. But now maybe examples of innovation. We've had several examples already from the previous speakers. And by the way, I love Mark's introduction and I don't find it controversial. I'm pretty much aligned with it. We are living proof of an amazing innovation project, which is the European project. The last time there was a common currency in Europe, a common currency that people accept for exchange and trust, before the euro, that has a similar geographic and cultural extent. Do you know what it was? It was the Roman ancestors. But that union was not, let's say, the result of a consultation and collaboration. It was rather forceful. So the fact that we're here and we are exchanging and we are talking with one another is an example of innovation, which is not necessarily technological, but it is very important. And that brings me to the point of how do you measure it? How do you measure innovation? How do you measure success? And one of the challenges I find is that often innovation is defined and the metrics are used based on retrospective narratives. So people take a success story, they rebuild it incorrectly, they create a linear story of that's where we were 10 years ago, this is where we are now, and we just need to do the same. And typically those things fail. Especially they fail when we have to talk about innovation in a complex space, and I use the word complex referring to complex system theory. Complex is something that is very hard to predict initially because it's dynamic, it's ramified, there's a lot of interactions. And guess what? The field you're in, it's complex. It's a complex field of complicated interactions, so it's very hard to plan ahead. On the other hand, it's also possible to say if you don't start working and you don't start working with some directionality, it's very unlikely that anything comes out of it. So it's a bit of a challenge because if you want to say beforehand what will be uptaken, it's very hard to predict. But if you don't start working on it, it's likely that nothing will happen. And we have these points about incentives and disincentives. It's very, very, very important because I like very much the idea of the market pull, technology push situation, and the regulatory environment perhaps as a meta pull that has to be done properly. Because the wrong incentives. Okay, I'll finish with the story about wrong incentives, and that's. I'm not completely sure if it's a true story, but it's a good story, which is good enough. Do you know the story about the cobra heads? Have you ever heard about? It's a story about incentives. So imagine you have a public health situation like under English imperial rule of India, and the public health issue is that people get bitten by cobras, which are deadly. So what do you do? Well, you want to get rid of cobras. So what do? Well, you put an incentive, bring me a cobra head and I will pay you money. That works, right? Until people realize that there's more and more cobra heads that are arriving, and actually the number should be decreasing, but no, it's increasing. Why? Because you've created a market for cobra heads. So people now are breeding cobras. And you're like, hey, I don't want people to breed cobras. So what do? You stop the incentive. So now what happens? People that have been farming cobras release them in the nature because they have no more incentive. So what do you have? You've created a higher number of casualties because now cobras are back in nature. So the incentives and the metrics we use to point our noses in complex innovation are very important. And that's why also we have to be careful when we give recommendations to the Commission, because they might adopt them. Then we have to live with those. I'd like to stop here and maybe we continue with the more or less controversial.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. And perhaps, Giannis, you might want to make a few comments to start this session, following on from your excellent discussion a few minutes ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I heard with a lot of interest, actually, the initial opening remarks. Giovanni, I like the story and about the cobras. And I would say, from my point of view, for our point of view in the Commission, as Isto mentioned through his vast experience, it's crucial to identify the real capabilities that are needed. And then once you do that, you move from a reactive perception to a more proactive. So you start investing now in order to have the solution in 10 years, because otherwise it won't happen. So innovation, in order to be at the time ready, needs to be identified as sort of capability today. I like another example that we often give. For example, if in the area of disaster risk management, when you have an earthquake today, the only thing that you can do is actually to hire more people to go under the debris and find signals of life. But then if you want a technology which can identify under the debris signals of life, you start investing today in order to have it in short term, in 5 years time, let's say. But then what about if you would like to have a robot to carrying this technology and going alone and finding these signals of life under the debris? This, in order to have it in 10 years, you need to start investing again now. So all these kind of innovations that we have in mind, we need to identify the clear capabilities now and to start investing and to start finding new innovations that can help us in long-term perspective, not just to start for short-term needs. We need to be more proactive and to have long-term planning in our capabilities. And because today the event is on PRECINCT, and I wanted also to focus a bit also on infrastructure protection. Now with the new directive, for example, there is a strong regulatory push, as Mark mentioned in his initial statement. The directive, CR directive and an IS2 directive, because I forgot to mention on cybersecurity, they both have an annex of critical areas, of sectors of critical areas, right? So by definition in the directive, the Commission and the co-legislators, basically, they have agreed that let's start from these 11 critical sectors. So as researchers, you have a guidance, if I may say, on the sectors, on the critical sectors that you can focus. So I urge you to start to read the legislation and to understand what is this regulatory push for the moment for innovation, because this will lead afterwards to uptake, to innovation uptake. Because at the end of the day, when member states have these 11 critical sectors, they will try to identify innovations that exist in the market. And they will say, okay, let's see what exists in the market as a solution for this and this and this sector. But if this research and then market uptake is not ready at the time, then we will have again this huge gap and the value of death, that most innovations that you are developing now, they will end up not to be uptaken. And there, I don't agree with Giovanni in the sense that innovation can exist, but if there is no uptake, there is no impact. So I'll stop here for my initial comments. More than happy to have questions.
Excellent. I think, Isto, you have a comment you'd like to make. Please,
Yes,
let's continue with this.
Yes, I like this idea about innovations uptake. For example, I've been working 25 years in the Finnish Coast Guard, in the headquarters. I know exactly how stakeholders and end users are looking for the capacity they need tomorrow. They are not looking innovations. They are looking for solutions. They are looking solutions which are operational. They compare which is the best solution, best price, and they will buy it. And that will take, the decision takes time, a couple of years. And once it's taken, the solution will keep their operational life in next 10 years, 15 years. And once it's pretty old and they compare the other ones in the other part of the Europe, they are starting to think about again, okay, maybe we need to have a new system on this topic. And then they do the new decision to buy new solutions. So there's the sequence of the need and the procurement. And the word innovation doesn't exist in this life. That's why we have to look about maybe a bit differently the future capabilities, what we do. So my innovation, nobody don't buy it because it's innovation. It has to be developed further, etc. So it doesn't lead anywhere. Other difficulty for the new innovations for the SME companies is that patent security. I know that Commission is planning to do some kind of a coherent European level patent initiative. I don't know where it is, but what is the situation? But the small companies can't fight against big companies about patent security. So somebody's stealing your patents. So that opens the new questions. Why do I open my innovation to the R&D projects like a Horizon? Because I'm not sure that I can keep my innovation with myself. So there are little details that good innovations may not reach European Horizon projects at all, because they want to safeguard their own businesses and sometimes hope that somebody's buying my patent in the future. Otherwise, big companies they can fight against the lawyer army, what they have. This leads me to this topic about project management and the next steps, how to uptake the innovations, what I gave my experience about AI Arc. We stopped this project next February, but we validated it's working. Then there's a missing parts. The missing part is that we should be testing it in between the member states somewhere and keep it running 2 years to show is it value added to the end users? Do the Finnish Coast Guard believe that this is something what I really want to have? And this is something what I want to buy. Nobody don't do it yet, but maybe we can organize, find the company tomorrow that is building this kind of a capacity for us. So they start negotiations, etc. But the problem is that the procurement sequence is not matching to their life. That's why I would look about the future that we could connect the operational agencies, what EU has a lot of in different sectors. Maybe they can support this kind of a procedure. Maybe they could give support to the member states, not through the procurement, rather than service providers. So the service providers kind of initiative is not grown enough in European level. We think that the procurement is the solution. It's not. it should be that the agencies like a Frontex, what we work with, they should be kind of supporting the member states in this capacity building, what is not happening today. So there are a lot of kind of, we are in the first steps in this world, and that's why it's very interesting how to uptake the innovations. But first of all, security of the innovation is one thing what we need to talk about.
I have an interesting comment which may shift gears slightly in all of this. What we're seeing now in a lot of the Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe projects is this drive to see where is the impact, where is the market uptake, where is the innovation uptake. I would contend that one of the goals of all this money that's going into all these projects, or if you would say, if I would call it that, I would say it is the goal. And I know that some of the elements have been mentioned. It's actually cooperation in Europe and keeping us working together and away from a time of conflict and war. Since the start of the European Union, there has not been a period of peace in Europe like we have now. And although, again, I'm shifting the focus a bit on this, but the reality of the situation is a lot of people, organizations, cultures have come together in order to be able to cooperate and interact in ways that would not have been possible if we didn't have all of these funding programs. So in a lot of ways, and I think it's been said as well, and I don't remember who said it, I think Giannis, you also said it, this is one of the elements that has resulted, but one of the innovations that's out there is this cooperation. And I think that going into the future, the benefit of that also weighs heavily on the result of what we're doing. Obviously, there are the challenges of saying, okay, if you invest in this area, will it have a result and an impact that the European Commission and those who are doing the projects would like to have in that area? As I say, unfortunately, there have been a lot of cases where that hasn't happened exactly as we would have planned and would have liked it. I bring into the equation then as well one of the other elements of this, which can also drive, in addition to the three elements that I mentioned, there's a fourth element too, which is standardization. If you have standardization and you have innovation, all of a sudden you have a situation that there can be standards which become standards just because of the fact that so many people have taken up the innovation. Whereas you can also have the other way around, which is you have standardization, which then forces the uptake of the technology and the innovation. And one of those examples is the GSM technology. The GSM technology was actually created originally in Europe, and because of the decision to standardize the way that the mobile phone technology was being used, and to say, okay, it has to be this, we have the global GSM approach and network, which means that you can use your mobile phone in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in the US, and everywhere because of a standard that was developed in Europe via Senelect. And so again, coming back to the situation, there are many ways to drive innovation uptake. Are we doing it well in some of our projects? Yes. Are we having challenges in others? Yes. But I do think that there are some elements which we have the potential in PRECINCT, but also in the other projects represented here, to do and have innovation uptake. Perhaps someone else on the panel wants to comment. Janice, please.
Yeah, maybe a sort of comment as well to depict what actually are some opportunities that exist. From the side of the Commission in the EU funding right now, we have in security research, under the area of SSRI, we have a call to support SMEs. And I wanted to mention that because Isto mentioned the challenges that SMEs are facing in our work program. So this specific call is designed to support SMEs with all the legal constraints that they may face and all the different aspects that an SME is facing, but also from this side, of this point of view. So in Horizon Europe now, in the current call of SSRI, we do have a call to support specifically SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And why I'm saying that, because then there are other opportunities for small innovations that they might have, and it's a pity to be lost. So there are small opportunities afterwards together under the Internal Security Fund, for example, or under the BMVI, which testing and validation could happen afterwards of an innovation. So there are tools, I would say, but we need to promote them to the community and to foster this discussion and these exchanges to answer these questions. And please ask the questions so we can provide the right tools for you.
Thank you. Giovanni, please.
So just for terminology's sake, I'm absolutely fine. Whatever you want to call innovation, I'll buy that. There's another word for capability and things that are new, and that could be the word is technology. And one of the frames we use is the technology readiness level. And speaking about capabilities and development and the valley of death, I'd like to maybe bring a dimension in this discussion that might help, which is the time frame of maturation that are needed, and also the scales of investment and risk that is needed. This is one thing that I'm so again, to maybe context about me, so that might help you. The first time I worked on a European project was when I was at Philips Central Research Laboratories in the early 2000s. And I proposed to a colleague to work on a thing that I thought was important for us to work on. And he came back saying, oh yeah, management is okay, you can go ahead and write a European proposal. I had no idea what the European proposal was, but after a couple of years, I was managing the first European project on flexible inkjet printed OLED displays in 2001. And I thought we were late, and we were. And you can see elements of some of that work in products today, only they're marketed by Korean companies. Sometimes the maturation time of technologies is measured in multiples of years. And I've had I was gonna say the pleasure, but it will not be completely true. I've had the privilege, that is true, to work on different projects, and most of them are not yet on the market. And I know that best case is gonna take another few years. So sometime another misconception is that it can accelerate time with money. Sometimes you can, sometimes it's much harder. And another misconception is that the technology readiness scale that you can adopt is linear. It's not. When you jump from one level to another, it's actually you're jumping by factor 10 often in resources, people, expertise. So I think the Commission can help, but the Commission is not infinite in its capabilities. And it can actually help with a mixture of directionality from directives and creating tools. But there's an entire area that is related to the strategies of companies. And one of the elements that help in those discussions are common vocabularies, like what is the level of maturity of a capability, and some of that vocabulary is remarkably imprecise quite often, so there's misunderstandings. The idea of directionality is embedded in roadmaps. And when an industry, you're talking about GSM, so the semiconductor industry has been exemplary in using roadmaps. Again, a roadmap is a story, by the way. A roadmap is a self-fulfilling prophecy in that field. You say, competition, I will be here 2 years from now. And the market can adapt to that because they can expect, if there is trust. Trust is, I say what I do, and I do what I say. So if the market knows, has sufficient trust in the industry to provide a certain level of capability, they can prepare. But then you need to deliver. This is Moore's law. Moore's law has propelled, I don't know, many hundreds of billions industries in the world, and it's based essentially on 1 to 2 years from now, I will be there. The components will be there. The capability will be there, and then you can plan. So I'm just trying to go back from 20,000 meter to here. When we're developing technologies in PRECINCT, and we're going out and telling people, hey, look at this, it's going to be wonderful. And there's the risk that people might say, yes, I'll buy it. But then somebody has to build it, and at some point they have to be able to sell it and to provide it as a service or as a product. And this is not just the commission, it's just on the national programs. It's actually companies that have a roadmap, and then they have to somehow align those roadmaps and actually do it. And that's not, it takes a lot of risk, it takes a lot of vision, it's hard, and sometimes you cannot compress time, but you can go further and faster when more people align their visions.
Esther, please, yes.
Interesting. This technical readiness level is the challenge for the SMEs. The low level technical readiness level, which is close to the innovation, actually, means that this low level in technical readiness level premature solution cannot be part of the Horizon Europe, because there's a requirement that has to be minimum 6 or 7 or whatever, and we know by definition that innovations in the early stage are 1 or 2. So there's a long way to go to the real life. I like this, Mark, what you said about this cooperation, because in the future we need to think about in EU level how the innovation uptake can be done. Maybe we need to do things differently what we have done so far. This cooperation, for example, in the area of maritime, what I know pretty well, sorry about that, cooperation between the member states in the, let's say, law enforcement level in Europe, we have 350 different authorities doing the same job. It's quite a lot to 27 countries. It means that the cooperation is, for different reasons, quite difficult, and everybody's competing each other. That means that we should build up more strong cooperational elements in order to look about new innovations to help our work, not fighting each other. And innovation is tool for be better than other ones, yes. But this Commission has made its work pretty well. There's many Coast Guard functions and their forums where they talk about existing situation every year in many sea areas. Let's say Mediterranean Coast Guard Forum, Atlantic Coast Guard Forum, even Arctic Coast Guard Forum where we work. But they don't do nothing else than talk. So should there be kind of a support by Frontex or EMSA that they kind of test new innovations? Maybe they could validate them before the market, and then the small companies could bring the new equipment, new solutions, and there's the place where they can show that what they can do. All this kind of operational, cooperational networking is kind of missing for the small companies at the moment.
That brings me back to, some of the pre-commercial procurement programs that have been in place with the European Commission. And of course, there are a lot of challenges for small, medium-sized enterprises there because the pre-commercial procurement has a lot of requirements to be sure that you have your customer there, also to be sure that you have, your own level of financing. So it can be quite challenging. So, as I understand the SSRI support for SMEs, I think this is an excellent initiative on the part of the Commission to have something where SMEs have a chance to step up to the plate with some good ideas. And unfortunately, yes, coming back to the projects, I think technology readiness level is a key issue. And as mentioned, Giovanni, please.
I'm sorry, but I have to step in as my conference timekeeper. It will be time to open the floor for questions. Otherwise, we're going to have an issue with coffee, and you don't want to be between coffee and people.
Absolutely. Okay, no problem. So yes, thank you very much for your comment on that. So the floor is open for questions. Please.
Denis Chaleta from ICS. Thank you very much for this really excellent discussion. I would like to point maybe one thing as a suggestion. We are talking about the critical infrastructure, and of course, Giannis in the beginning in the presentation really put a good overview, the steps, how we are evolving the critical infrastructure protection innovations and projects. But nevertheless, I would like to point to the defense area. Now the defense, so the IDA starts to work also in the area of the protection critical infrastructures. Pretty much 4 or 5 years ago, they started with this work. And they are pretty much dealing the same things we deal here in the civil area. So critical infrastructure probably is the central point where we could join the forces and the finances. And I think that we don't need silos approach regarding critical infrastructure. Why? For example, Slovenia is a small country, 2 million people. So the capacity of our national security system is quite, challenging regarding the critical infrastructure protection processes. And in our country, the Slovenian armed forces are quite involved also in some parts of civil activities if I compare to the bigger countries. And for this reason, I think that this could be some kind of good example how we could, of course, do this comprehensive approach regarding the critical infrastructure protection also in this innovation action area, and to join all finances and forces in the same direction. Maybe this is my suggestion in this discussion here. Thank you.
I think what we'll do is we'll take a couple of questions and then we'll answer. So thank you very much for your question and your comment. Are there other questions? Well, maybe I can add one of mine into the equation. If there were 1 or 2 areas that you believe are, let's say, low-hanging fruit, what would those be in terms of innovation uptake? And what would be the best way to actually go from where we are now to getting those innovations taken up by the marketplace? So that would be my question for each of the panelists. Please.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I will start. Thank you very much for the comment. And actually, that's a very interesting point. And it relates to the different legal framework that we have in the EU. So protection of critical infrastructure, as you are very well aware, it's a civil area, right? And according to the regulation of Horizon Europe, all research that is performed under Horizon Europe needs to be on civil applications exclusively. So according to the legal framework right now, I would say we do not work on silos, but we focus our resources to civil applications on protection of critical infrastructure. And at least that's the legal framework for now. In the future, who knows? But now with the new directive, the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, the member states, they have to define their critical entities, and this will help a lot the community, the researchers, to focus and to target, and not to do silos, as you said, with defense, now looking on new technologies and new innovations to protect assets. It's also a different perspective to the two worlds, because, you know, civil world has also civil requirements and also looks at a more comprehensive scenarios rather than military scenarios that they are there just to strike and to follow up the mission. That mission was accomplished. It's a different area and a different world between the two. But I say that now for the moment, that's the legal framework that we have. And throughout the years, maybe with a new directive in place, research might be more focused. And actually, I wanted also to comment on the technology readiness level, because I'm very positive towards this discussion, and I'm very happy to say that we have one project actually now up and running, which is called Multi-Rate, and it looks on all the different technology readiness levels, societal readiness level, and all these different calculators to create a comprehensive framework that we will have all a standard methodology on how to assess TRLs and all the different calculators, I would say. And finally, for your question, Mark, regarding the areas, security research has always been more forward than the different sectors that we are defining with policy. So if we see and take stock of past innovations, they exist in more sectors than the 11 sectors that they were defined in the directive. Of course, in some others, there are more projects and more research on innovations that are close to the market. But I would say that we are well equipped to respond to different challenges that we face in different sectors.
Isto, please.
Okay, I would like to comment this EDF issue as well. The problem here is that there's a national interest, there's a commission interest, its agencies' interests, and there's a business interest. Critical infrastructure, according to NATO research, is more than 90% owned by civilian companies. How we connect the member state kind of interest to the civilian company interest, which can be multinational company. So there's not easy thing to put those things to the different baskets or even to the same baskets. So there is challenge to understand, but the ownership is the stakeholders who owns the share owners in the companies, and they might not want to have this kind of a guidance or regulations, etc. They want to do their own way, because this is the Western world. We are not the kind of centralized, the decision making doesn't exist. So there's some debate to do. What is the long-hanging fruit? You had the question. I have a wonderful low-hanging fruit in my project. We are working in anomaly detection automatically by satellite and other data what we can collect at the moment. Today, we are not surveilling about the security of subsea cables between the member states, because nobody is having them one ownership. They are in different member states, they are land-based, they are maritime-based, they are undersea, they are difficult area of surveillance. And nobody's doing automatically what is happening on the top of the cables. In our project, we made the solution which is automatically can see anomaly on the top of the cable. So you know the history about the last year when some pipelines were exploding over there. we can tell who was there on that moment today. So this is a global service as well. It's not related to the Arctic. We can do it in my summer house, in my lake area in Finland, or in your backyard. So this is the technology is now in the level what we didn't even imagine 10 years ago. Today we can do amazing things, and we can protect our critical infrastructure very well. And this is an example.
Excellent. Giovanni, please.
Thank you for the challenging question of the low-hanging fruit. I think one of the many challenges is it's always the competition between what is urgent and important and recognized as a problem, and if you have no solution, it's not a problem. So if you're managing a critical infrastructure, and you might not even aware, first of all, you need to be aware of a certain class. We're talking with Precinct about interconnectedness and cascading effects. I'm not completely sure this is, top priority. The awareness of the impact that those things could have could be maybe a point to raise, and that's training. It could be the right communication, which I think Precinct is contributing to, but certainly not the only project. But creating awareness without also creating access to potential solutions, or at least a roadmap to solutions, is also not very helpful. And I know there's a lot of projects that create marketplaces and things, but enabling the ability for people that, first of all, creating awareness, and then somehow matching the awareness to the market. You mentioned many companies, small, medium, not so small companies, but how do you connect the two? That's and I think there might be not so complicated ways to do that, so that we can help somehow the market find itself and create itself. So that might be one thing.
Excellent. Now we're coming very quickly to the end of the session, but I want to give everyone the opportunity for let's say 1 minute elevator pitch from the panelists to say, what is your key message? What is the key issue you would like to share and to leave everyone thinking about after this session is finished? So whoever wants to go first, you're very welcome to do so. Isto, please.
I'm always in the bad situation. This I would like to change the Horizon innovation uptake policy in the way that we don't stop the projects to the last conference. We go to the testing and service-based solution together with the agencies. Today, it's forbidden that agencies are part of the projects. Maybe we should look about this issue differently.
Thank you.
I think it's important that the right actors are around the table and the intentions are clarified, but also the timeframes. And especially in a project like Precinct, I think it's very exciting to see how a lot of the design has taken place. But for technologists, it's not just about creating a solution; it's also about creating something that fits also in the communication, the problem that's recognized on the other side. And on the other side, it's important also to open up sufficiently, because if you don't, then just to go back also what Janis was saying, then you'll never get there. It's a long journey.
Yes, maybe from my point of view, I would say, because we're talking about uptake of those innovative solutions, in the area of critical infrastructure and resilience now, there are huge opportunities coming up. And my biggest aspiration, I would say, would be to see all those solutions that have been developed all over those years to be actually there protecting our critical infrastructure and protecting our citizens. So to be real uptake and have impact for the society.
And as the moderator, I take the opportunity to have the last word. I really like this whole idea of looking at all of the things that have happened and perhaps maybe a specific project to actually go back and look at all of the different projects. And by the way, going back even to FP6, FP5, even the preparatory action on security research, and look at a lot, there's a huge number of projects, and look at them and see if there are some opportunities to actually bring those innovations, even to bring those ideas back to the marketplace, because maybe they have been forgotten. So this might be an idea for a new potential topic for the Commission, would be to actually do this analysis going back significantly in time, because some things are, let's say, lost to history. But in the final analysis, I have to put in my plug for SMEs, and have to say that it's much appreciated that there is a focus by the Commission on the SME community. My SME hat comes as the Vice Chairman for SMEs for the European Organization for Security and for the European Cybersecurity Organization. I'm with both hats. I'm representing the SME community, not to mention my own company, which is a micro SME. So from that standpoint, my key message would simply be, don't let off the accelerator pedal, especially with the SME community. That is where the innovations happen. Of course, there are many other challenges, and for the SME community, which are, if you compare it to the SME community in other places like North America, where the financial component is very different. And of course, in Europe, we also have the fragmentation just due to the fact that we have many different languages and cultures. So in the end, I think this has been an interesting topic to discuss. I think we have from the low-hanging fruit you've mentioned, and from the discussion about what the Commission is doing, I think we have a lot of interesting things to take up from here. And thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you also to the audience and for your questions. And I think we're going to get ready to have our coffee break now. So maybe I can actually announce that, or you want to announce that? Okay, no problem. I'll hand it back to Giovanni.
Thank you very much. Please enjoy your coffee, and 5 minutes, it's not realistic. Let's try to be back here 10 minutes from now, so that the next panel has enough time for the presentations. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. Very good. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, really.
Great discussion.
Yep.
Are you staying with us, or do you need to leave?
I think to go to the office.
Yeah.
I will stay for the coffee break, and then
Please join us.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
It's all good. Hello. We are starting again. So I would like to invite you to take your seats, please. I know that your networking is very important, but we are a little bit behind on time. So I'd like to ask you again to please take your seats, and I'd like to welcome our next panel, who's going to be moderated by Georgios Sakas, and I hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. He was a research associate at Kemea, and in the panel we will have Erkunen Rios, who's a super expert both in security and in creating and managing European projects. And she had a wonderful breakout session yesterday on AI and security. We have the pleasure to welcome Paolo Venturoni, who's the CEO of the European Organization for Security. For those of you that have not connected the dots, that's thanks to them and to Giacomo and Vincent that we have the conference here in this beautiful venue with the amazing booklet that I hope you've read. And we also have Dr. Caterini Pustoli, who's actually representing the strategy project, and she's online. So she's going to join us virtually. So the floor is yours, Georgios, for the panel.
Thank you. So, good morning to everyone. I hope, so this goes next back. Okay, perfect. For those of you who don't know me, probably the most of you, because I don't know most of you, okay. My name, I'm George Sakas. Georgios is the, let's say, official Christian, okay, so usually it's George. I work at the Center for Security Studies in Greece, short name KEMEA, as most of you probably have seen it somewhere in the projects. Okay, I'm related mainly to the disaster resilience programs due to my expertise, but in some cases, and I'll tell you a story before, let's say, start the discussion about the directive. I'm engaged in some specific concepts for the critical infrastructures. Now, how I would like to give the floor, I will make, let's say, a short introduction. The presentation is just to point out a few issues of the new directive. Then I will give the floor to Mr. Venturoni for an introductory comments, of course, to Mrs. Rios and to Caterina. Caterina, I will leave you last but not least because you are online and you have a presentation. So I hope that.
Thank you.
Okay, I understand that you can hear us very well as well. And then after, let's say, Caterina makes the presentation, we can have some comments, and if you want, we can not only have a discussion between the panel, but we could open it if you would like to somehow touch. And when we should end the panel at 11:40.
11:45. I'll give you
11:50.
11:50. We'll do that. I'll give you a signal at 10 minutes early so you can for the Q&A.
Okay. So, okay, I'm starting with a story. Probably you have heard it, most probably not, but at least those that you are in the PRECINCT, let's say, project, you have an idea. At KEMEA in Greece, KEMEA actually is the national contact point for European critical infrastructures in Greece, actually for critical infrastructures that have a European extent. Okay. A couple of years ago, a project funding from the International Security Fund, ended. It was about to strengthen the cooperation between critical infrastructures and emergency responders. At that time and during this project, it was a 5-year project with a small extension, 5.5, if I remember correct. We were dealing only with critical infrastructures at the point of the energy and the transport sector. And a pilot coordination center was developed in order, a full software installation and all of this, and a few exercises also took place. And actually the last two were held as an online due to the COVID restrictions, and practically we tested also the system as in a more real life, let's say, situation, because in a real life event, everyone is during their office and they're not gathering in a room. And from there, let's say, the pilot coordination center behind the whole infrastructure had the point to create two main applications. The one was to an incident reporting applications. Everything was in Greek. Okay, it was related to the Greek reality a bit more, but it has, let's say, the same European aspect. The incident reporting application and the risk application, which was mainly an overview of the situation in terms of daily risks and hazards and, of course, the specific incidents. So we would like then, the idea came from the original, let's say, proposal. I will start also the presentation from the original, the green paper from 2005 and the directive from 2008 that discussed that at some point the member states should notify for critical events that disrupt the services in critical infrastructures, and you know all the details. Actually, it went pretty good because it was the first time that all the infrastructures were together with the first responders, meaning all the first responders, from the general civil protection to Hellenic police, to Hellenic fire service, to Hellenic the medical services, and they started to work on various scenarios, and they started to collaborate. That was the main issue. And of course, for the collaboration, we wanted to see the cascading event. So you have an event in an infrastructure, but what happens in the case that this infrastructure is connected somehow with another infrastructure? For example, you have a very big highway that sends you directly to the airport or to a big port. What happens if you have an incident, a car accident in the highway? Is this going to disrupt the service of the airport or vice versa? It doesn't matter. So we started from this, and the project ended. We're now developing, as I showed yesterday, the incident reporting in another project that we are trying to standardize it. I'm not going to repeat this again. And now we came, let's say, to 2020, that we have a new proposal for a new directive that says that we have to upgrade the old one. And it came on July of 2022 that we have an agreement in the EU that we say, okay, we are going to publish a new directive for the resilience of critical entities along with the cybersecurity, the NIS2 directive. And of course, at the end of the year, on December, we have the publication, the official publication of two directives that are related to critical infrastructures. And so let's say, here comes the issue that the new directive starts to discuss about not exactly critical infrastructure, but critical entities. This is something that was discussed especially during the workshop of the standardization that we have. We are talking about not only for critical infrastructures, but critical entities, and infrastructure could be a part of the entity. In addition, you can see in the slide, unfortunately, you cannot see it because it's in the back, but okay. We have the directives actually now gives all the framework that says that the critical entities should start make the risk assessment. The nation should start make risk assessment for the critical entities. Actually, the member states have to identify which are the critical entities. That's a big issue, not only in the national level, but also on the European level, which makes things even, let's say, more difficult. We have to discuss about interconnected infrastructures or entities. We have to discuss about interconnected, not only of the same type of organization, but between different types of organizations, so from energy to transport or to banking or to anything or to health, but also between the member states. We have to take resilience measures for the infrastructures. We have to says that you have to notify about incidents. Actually, for disruptive incidents, the infrastructure should notify in the next 24 hours the national competent authority. So there's another question. Which is the national competent authority in each member state, and of course, in a European level? The member states should practically do background checks on the infrastructure and should always monitor the infrastructures, but also the member states should support the infrastructures in order to implement the directive, which is also difficult. They have to provide support, advisors, and all this. There is a connection also with the other directive, the NIS 2 for the cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is in our lives for many years now and will be probably much more. Even a new car, if you buy a new car, with a new car, you get a mobile application, which probably don't know how to use it, but this is another issue. And the problem is that you may have a hacker that could easily turn on your car or steal your car by stealing your application, somehow hacking your application. And they set some milestones. That's even more difficult, especially for the public authorities, because they have to file to follow the milestones. So we have, by November of 2023, we have to, the EC will publish a new list of the critical entities of the types. They have already some types of the entities in the annex of the directives, but we will have a new list. By next year, let's say again autumn, all the necessary measures that need to comply will be published. By 2026, early 2026, the member states have to adopt a strategy how they will enhance their critical entities, and they have to update this every 4 years. This could be something similar like to the national risk assessment, the civil protection of each member state now. In Europe, every 3 years sends to the DG Home, let's say to the central DG Home, an update of their national risk assessment plan. So this could be something similar. By 2027, the summer of 2027, the Commission shall submit to the European Parliament and the Council a report that assesses the extent to which each member state starts to, or at least start to fulfill the measures that are proposed by the directive. By 2028, the single point of contacts have to submit summary reports. So it's something that has to be done, and this has to be updated every 2 years. And of course, the critical entities must submit and carry out, of course, a risk assessment 9 months after they have been, let's say, identified and characterized. So there's a number of milestones, at least for the next 5 years, that have to be fulfilled not only by the member state and the member states and the critical infrastructure. So we're starting to discuss a bit about good collaboration, regulation, and let's say other fulfillments. So with this, let's say I think that for those of you that may have not, let's have a look at the directive, you may, let's say, get an idea of what they propose. I will give the floor now to Mr. Venturoni for a comment. Whatever you want. Please, come.
Thank you, George. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So, critical entities. Actually, we believe that both the Critical Entities Directive and the NIS 2 Directive represent two critical pieces of legislation which will help to ensure a better protection of critical infrastructure. And regarding the Critical Entities Directive, in particular, I want to underline a couple of points which we consider important. One is the requirement for member states to conduct risk assessments. And the second point is the requirement for critical entities to ensure the protection against security risk. And this is very important. As a matter of fact, we believe that security risks for critical infrastructures are poised to increase. The reason being the evolution of the international geopolitical situation, where hybrid threats play and will be playing an increasingly important role. And within a hybrid threats framework, certainly critical infrastructure represent a target of choice. Let me say a couple of words of what we mean by hybrid threats, because there are different interpretations of the terms. People understand different things. For EOS, hybrid threats are state-sponsored threats kept below the threshold of an open military confrontation, threats that can be plausibly denied. So we're talking of threats that must be easy to deny. Otherwise, we would step into a full military arena. And within the domains, I mean, I would say the overall security ecosystem, there are some domains which are more prone to this type of attacks, exactly for the reason of plausible deniability. And for a physical threat standpoint, these two domains for us are in particular the space and the maritime domains. We are following in particular the maritime domain with a lot of attention. That's, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the recent maritime strategy. It's very interesting in terms also of technological contents. At this point, we have a robust regulatory framework. We have a, how can I say, a threat landscape, which is worsening. So the point is what we do next. What do we do next? First of all, I think we need to underline the fact that cyber and physical threats to critical infrastructure are an internal security matter, not a defense one. So the first step we need to take at the European level is certainly to increase the level of funding for security research. And there are several areas which are critical to the security of critical infrastructure, talking about research. Here I will be mentioning 3 of them, which are areas where, as EOS, we are concentrated on. First of all, autonomous systems, including swarms of drones. Autonomous systems for the purpose of situational awareness, for the purpose of countering drones attacks. Then we have multi-sensors, situational awareness, command and control systems. And finally, digital twins to increase the resilience of critical infrastructures. Okay, so this is the first step. So the second point is, okay, what next after research? We need to, and this is a topic which is very much debated, how do we ensure the uptake of research results? We believe there are 2 avenues we can follow. The first one is probably the most direct, is through the implementation of procurement programs. If you tie clearly the research activities to a follow-on procurement, clearly there's going to be an uptake. The second avenue is more indirect. It's about setting up European partnership, joint undertakings. There are several joint undertakings in place in Europe. There's none in the security domain. We think it's about time to start a JU for security. The advantage of a JU is it's being, to a very good extent, industry-driven. And clearly, industry will not want to invest in research that will not translate into products. So this by itself will ensure a greater likelihood of uptake. Clearly, research for security is a very broad domain. So, I mean, it's clearly we do not want a JU where clearly certain topics will be privileged compared to others. to drain resources at the expenses of the general security research funding line. But still, they should go together. And we think that with the new commission, we as a community should push for that. Okay, this concludes my points.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a couple of slides, well, 3 or 4, coming back to this relation between the CERT directive and the NIS2 directives. As you know, we have already said that the CERT directive defines critical entities, while the NIS2 directive speaks about essential entities and important entities. No, all of them need to be defined or identified by the member states. And in the following slide, you will see, yes, the comparison of each of them. No, then the essential entity in the NIS Directive 2, it's all entities that are identified by member states that are from the list of the Annex 1 of NIS Directive, or and this Annex 1 lists a lot of sectors, critical sectors mostly, and characterizes in the Annex 1, in the third column of the table that they provide, they characterize which are these entities from those sectors, no, that they consider essential entities. And all potential essential entities need to be identified. Which ones are really essential entities need to be identified by the member states. In fact, they allow that the ones that were mentioned before as operators of essential services are now essential entities. No? So the natural way of working is that all operators of essential entities will be now essential entities. And the critical entities that are mentioned in the CERT directive can also be essential entities. So this is due to the fact that, for example, and smart grid currently already uses a lot of network devices there, communicating the hardware, the OT systems, all the messages in the OT systems, all the information in the OT systems goes through IT systems. And also because of the fact that, for example, currently the smart grids, they also have very big parts of software-defined networks. And they are software-defined networks running on top of software devices, not so much hardware-relying devices. And all this information, it's a kind of IT information, okay? So, in fact, any critical entity has infrastructure which is built upon a network and a software infrastructure and hardware infrastructure, which is really an essential entity, no? So essential services there. And this is the link between the telco and the network, supporting all other equipment, all other systems, because they are together now. We don't separate them now. And those that are also from important or critical sectors, but not so essential, not so critical, can be identified by the member states as important entities. And these important entities are from a list of sectors and a list of activities, like, for example, research, that are in Annex 2 of NIS Directive. So it's in the CERT directive when they define critical entity, because NIS Directive 2 doesn't define as such doesn't provide a definition of essential entity and important entity, but they say what are they, no? But the third directive explicitly has a definition about critical entity, and they say that it's any public or private entity which has been identified by the member state as a critical entity, no? And it's from one of the types of the annex of the directive. And this annex is exactly the same as Annex 1 of NIS Directive 2. So we are speaking about the same types of entities here. The only thing is that all the IT staff, all the OT supported by IT of the critical entity, it's an essential service that needs to be ruled by the NIS Directive 2. That's all. So it's like, this is the third directive, goes for all the critical entities, and those that have an infrastructure that is running on top of some IT or OT, but this OT is supported by IT, then NIS directive applies to. That's all. And this is the Annex 1 in NIS Directive 2. So you can see that there are a lot of sectors that can be considered critical by the member state. And in fact, there are some subsectors already identified from them, like for example, in energy and in transport, that there are like quite a lot of branches there. But in order to be essential, they define some characteristics in the third column. And the same, this Annex 1 is just the same as Annex in the third directive. And the Annex 2 are things like, for example, postal and courier services, which are not so essential, they are critical, they are important, no? And the same with manufacturing, research, and other stuff, okay? So the member states can identify particular research entities, particular postal services, or whatever, and name them as important entities, and they need to fulfill the NIS Directive 2. And there is an exception in the third directive of some articles that the entities in the digital sector do not need to fulfill because they are already fulfilling the NIS Directive 2. And the same with some banking and financial entities. So these exceptions are from the third directive because they are already ruled by the NIS Directive 2. So these things are like this cooperation between member states, which is about when they are cooperating, they are not cooperating on the third directive, they are cooperating on the NIS Directive 2, because the digital sector entities already fulfill that. The same with this resilience. Resilience is ruled by NIS Directive 2 when you are in the digital sector or you are in a bank in the banking. And the same with these critical entities of particular European significance. From all the digital entities, the member states can identify some particular entities that are of real importance for Europe. And there is a special articles there ruling that part. And also this supervision and enforcement about the penalties and so on are different between CER and this directive for the digital sector companies. And as you see in both directives, it says that the authorities ruling or supervising all this fulfillment and enforcement of the rules of the directive, they need to cooperate. Okay, so in fact, the third directive authorities request the NIS Directive to the authorities to please start the assessment, the risk assessment, the cyber risk assessment, and so on. Okay, so NIS Directive 2 is more about cyber risks and about all these cyber incidents, communication, and cyber risk assessments. And the third directive is this other non-cyber, not so much cyber risks and cyber incidents, but other type of incidents. But in fact, probably when as we have seen these days, yesterday and today, these hybrid threats are so interconnected that sometimes a cyber threat can cause another type of threat, which is not really in the cyber plane, but in more physical plane. So they need to, of course, they need to cooperate. It's not clear though whether this the incident reporting for each of the directives, if they are they could be done at the time or not, in the sense that the directive said what is needed to be done, but not how. And this how may be different, no? It's not the same, an incident about the crisis, for example, about the potential crisis happening, that an incident about the potential cyber threat happening, no? So maybe the formats of this incident communication and so on might be slightly different, but of course, I think they need to be interoperable. This is the key message, no? If the authorities need to cooperate at the high level, why not our information systems, information sharing systems, our incident reporting systems? Why don't we design them to be interoperate, no? All the layers of this hybrid to be interoperable. And that is the last slide. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Katerina, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you, Georgios.
Okay, the floor is yours, but please try to be really fast.
Yeah, I will do my very best. Just give me some seconds to, let's say, upload and share my screen. I think that now is okay. Is it okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So
if you want, just put it on the presentation mode.
Yeah,
But in any case, we can see it. Don't worry.
I did it, but it is, you know,
okay, proceed.
The same
don't
failure
worry.
that it happens in such cases. So it is that moment.
Okay, it's
yeah,
fine.
It's okay now?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, great, Georgios. Thank you very much. But first of all, I would like to express my my thanks, my deepest thanks for having me in the PRECINCT conference. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here with all of you. And it is this special moment in the conferences when you feel fascinated from all the previous speeches, and you say to yourself, "Oh, what I would say now that will contribute with a slight, let's say, added value to this effort done from the exceptional experts and people of all these projects and consortium." So it is important to, let's say, that at least for myself, that I identified that during yesterday and today, very important, let's say, aspects raised, concerns raised by all the speakers and the audience, the panel discussions, etc. So one point is that somehow that what done till now, what we have to do from so on, and how will be done, how let's say the upcoming efforts will be more collaborative, efficient, secure, and not in silos. So we are all working in the societal security, the military or the defense domain aspect. It is okay, somewhere next to us, but here in this directive, we have to prepare ourselves as member states, as research and innovation communities, as local authorities, as practitioners, scientists, academia, properly in order to, let's say, apply to implement efficiently the mandate of the European Commission, and to do it with such a way by mitigating all the, let's say, the risks or the threats from the outside and the inside environment. So let's remember the words of the Commissioner for Home Affairs, Mrs. Ilya Johansson. In the light of the current geopolitical situation in Europe, enhancing our resilience is of key importance. This directive will make us better prepared against disruptions that impact the security of our citizens and the prosperity of the internal market, following the lessons learned from the pandemic and long-term challenges like climate change. The new directive will ensure the provision of essential services such as energy, transport, water, and healthcare, while minimizing the impact of natural and man-made incidents. So, the third directive replaces the previous one of 2008 and will strengthen the resilience of critical infrastructure to a range of threats, including natural hazard, terrorist attacks, insider threats, or sabotage. So the 11 sectors presented very well from the previous speaker and speakers. I will not stay here. The milestones also, Georgios, highlighted by you sufficiently before a couple of minutes. We all know that everything will be done in combination with the other directives, the NIS, the new Interoperable Europe Act. Maybe, or not maybe, there is a connection with the 5 Union disaster resilient goals, and also the EU new standardization strategy, the Artificial Intelligence Act, and many other let's say, acts, legislative acts that connected with the NIS2 and the cybersecurity framework. I will not present the articles one by one. These are well known from all of you. I will say again that again the big issue, the big challenge is the governance of the complexity of the interconnected and interdependent world, because we are focused to the impact, and the impact is very crucial because it has to do with the human and living beings in the societies, in the communities, in regions, in the whole planet, in our universe, actually. So in this case, many projects like all of you, the PRECINCT, the strategy, the EU EVNet, and many others, the Praetorian, all the relevant projects, they are doing exceptional work in order to, let's say, to make the societies thrive and to be shields against all these hazards and risks. I had the honor to participate and to contribute in the strategy project. As said before, I missed this part, and I'm really sorry for this. I'm Ekaterini Poustourli. So I had a background mainly in the robust engineering, in standardization, in safety and security. I used to work for the European Commission in GRC and in DG Home Affairs. So more or less, I am aware about the challenges, and I'm trying to contribute in the both ecosystems, the research, innovation, and also the standardization ecosystem from that point of view, meaning to, let's say, to deliver some outcomes in the form of standardization deliverables or standard operational procedures in order to enhance, to shield the societies, the citizens, the practitioners, all the actors in the specific domain against risk, threats, etc. So under the strategy project is running a specific stream, which is relevant to critical infrastructure protection. And the last month delivered some exceptional technical reports. Apologies if I am a little bit biased, but this is live. In these cases, you feel very proud when you have the opportunity to collaborate with exceptional experts that delivered outcomes like this. So under the stream 2, which is dedicated to critical infrastructure protection, we do have delivered 2 CEN workshop agreements which are dedicated to two specific domains, and now are, let's say, are available in the Sensenelec website and are available for public consultation. So this means for those that are interested in the specific fields, they will have the opportunity to deliver, to let's say, to contribute with comments, and to have a very good idea for the work done under the specific stream of strategy projects, and also from other streams like the response planning and the command control. In the slides, you have the links available, and till 9th of June or 11th of June, you will definitely have the opportunity to submit your comments to the specific exceptional deliverables. I will also, I would like to mention also the European Reference Network of Critical Infrastructure Protection, which is an initiative of the GRC, of the Joint Research Center. And as I said before in the beginning of my speech, I had the opportunity to work there with really, let's say, experts. And under the 8 thematic groups that the project, the office ran, delivered equally exceptional technical reports. So I'm referring to the specific projects similar to the ones that, for example, took funds under the FP7 framework. I would like to mention the ZoneSec project, which deliver a very interesting, important for the research innovation ecosystem, CWA, Center Workshop Agreement, dedicated to the security of the white zones. So we see with all these deliverables a history, a background where exceptional researchers worked and delivered all these reports that are very useful in the reality and the everyday life. So we need, again, a way in order to coordinate all these useful deliverables, maybe under one platform. We don't know, we have to find something. We're running the Industrial Revolution 4, so all these tools of artificial intelligence and quantum computing and hypercomputing and hyperconnectivity are here in order to support this effort. So I think that we are able to create a good future with all the relevant stakeholders, Commission, industry, research, innovation, academia, citizens to be engaged and to work, let's say, with an harmonized way to this direction. I mean that all of us have a common goal: to remain vivid, safe, and secure in the planet. So, as I said before, there is a need to take into account not only what happens inside the European Commission, inside the specific member state, but also to have a good eye on what happens in the rest of the planning, meaning that it is always beneficial to know what is the US strategy on critical infrastructure, China's strategy, Russia's strategy and policy. All these give, let's say, a valuable input on how to shield better our critical entities and states and region and planet. So as a final remark, I would say that member states and all the relevant stakeholders should carefully monitoring the new legal framework and their obligations in terms of the new directive, to learn well the requirements for the EU and non-EU firms and entities, to update their national training programs accordingly relative to the national risk assessment to critical entities, etc. And of course, an interinstitutional collaboration is needed. The service community is a community which contributes with the best way in our, let's say, efficiency, in the efficiency of all the ecosystems. So we have to follow up the policies, the legislation, the regulations, the standards, maybe to create a vivid platform of all the projects delivered, let's say, relative deliverables dedicated to critical infrastructure or entities, and to see how to harness all the innovations, the patents, the systems, the tools, etc. Most of all, for myself, it is to keep an anthropocentric approach for building trust and capacities, and to be in alignment with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, to have, let's say, orchestrated efforts under these EU interinstitutional collaboration governance, and of course to valorize the international experience. I just illustrate a couple of examples, the framework of Japan Society 5, an international workshop agreement in which I had the opportunity to work on a gap analysis. And also it is very important to find a way in order to have access directly to the collaboration among the international technical standardization technical committees. I consider that the liaison among the technical committees and the liaisons among the research projects and the technical committees is something that will give us an advantage. So this is also for my side. I'm here in your availability for further discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katerina, for the very thorough and detailed, let's say, presentation. Always you catch the details. If you have any fast question or comment that you would like to discuss, I think we have a few minutes. Okay, I don't see any. To be honest, I would like to ask a question one question for you. Do you, in your countries, do you have started the procedure for identifying the critical entities or essential entities? This is another issue that can be discussed, but are you aware of it or not? Yes, please.
Yes, in Italy, in example, the critical infrastructure were identified. There is a problem because the ministry kept the secret on the critical infrastructure per the NIS directive, the operator relevant for the NIS director. So the infrastructure knows, but others don't. So it's a problematic issue. So we always recall to simply critical infrastructure. But in the perspective of making a list, a new list, I don't know what will be the solution.
But in any case, somehow it has been started. Yeah, this. Yes, please.
So to give a short overview from Austria, we do have a list of critical infrastructures. It's about 400 critical infrastructures. The list is, of course, confidential. So we're quite similar as in Italy. But the critical infrastructures themselves know about it, of course. Then we have a second list, which is the NIS 1 list. So coming from the first version of the directive, which is, I think, a subset of this 400 organizations. And now I know that there are the first activities to identify the critical infrastructures that are, or the essential services that would fall under the NIS 2, which is something between the 400 and maybe 2,000 infrastructures. So this is a huge amount that is coming. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure whether this new list for the NIS2 will correlate one-to-one, or where maybe there are some differences with the CER directive, so the critical resilient entities. So I'm very much looking forward and excited to see how this is going to be solved. But people, particularly in the ministries, they are working on that, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
Yes, Denis Čeleta from Slovenia. The same situation is in Slovenia. So maybe to add what Stefan said, we will see what the NIS Directive 2 will put on the table. Probably, of course, for sure, much more entities in this list. And I am pretty sure that all entities from the CR directive will be inside of this list. So this is pretty much expectation in Slovenia.
Okay, one half a minute comment, if you have something to add, because we have to close the session. Okay, I can have, let's say, just 2 comments very fast. I see an issue between the CER directive and the NIS2 directive. In my opinion, it should be one, because there are big connections there and you cannot avoid it. Every critical infrastructure has an IT part, okay, so they should follow everything. And the other, just to connect it with the previous session, practically now, maybe the innovation uptake now is to start implementing the directives with any means that we find at least appropriate to continue, and see, of course, any issues that we can improve, anything that can be improved in the future, it can be improved, but in any case, we start to implement this in order to move a step forward. Okay, that's it. I think that we can close. Thank you. We are a bit of time, okay? 5 minutes more, okay.
Thank you, George. Thank you again to all the panelists. And it's actually an ungrateful task to be checking the time because it's a lot of very interesting inputs. I would like to, don't know if this is working, but I'd like to invite to the floor Sandra Koenig of AIT. And are you going to present with Aljoša together? And Aljoša Pasic from the technology, was from Atos SA and is technology transfer director there. So the floor is yours. If you manage to try to pick up a little bit of time, that would be appreciated. And if you need.
Thanks. Yes, we try to make up some time, which means actually the slides are not needed yet because Aljoša will start if I'm correct.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so I will start immediately by sharing my screen. And as soon as you can see it, let me know so I can start. Is it there? You can see it there?
Yes.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Sandra, and thanks everybody for inviting me and inviting Sunrise Project, which is, I'm aware that there are a couple of more representatives of Sunrise projects in the audience. So I'm sure that they will also be able to answer questions if there are any questions after these presentations. My name is Aljoša Pasic. You see here Atos/Eviden, and I should clarify that Atos is a company, I think, very well known in European projects and overall in security field, but is in the process of splitting into 2 companies. I will stay in a part called Eviden. So the both parts, Atos and Eviden, will be around 60,000 people. We are now 120,000 in Athos, and the both parts will stay with around 60,000 people. But in this period, I'm using, my email is still athos.net, but on LinkedIn and on other social media, I'm already using Eviden as a new company. Anyway, going to the Sunrise presentation, this is outline, typical project presentation, but I will do a little bit more focus on cyber physical security solution, which is a part that Athos is doing. And for the general information about the project, context and overview, I also invite you to look at the website, sunriseeurope.eu. There is a list of partners. We have 41 partners. Many of these partners are the same, like PRECINCT, or it's quite similar. Also, some objectives are quite similar. The project coordinator is my colleague Antonio, and as I said, this is the context of the project, and I will go into some of these objectives a little bit more in detail right now. Challenges are related to COVID and pandemic. So we have number of measures that have been and lessons learned during the COVID that were impacting critical infrastructure. So we had, for example, adaptations that were needed. These adaptations are very frequently done on the fly, and not only in cyber physical systems, but also in general in impact. For example, reconfiguration of production systems. Remember, we did not have masks in some period. Then use of QR codes, which is bringing additional risk. So many of these issues during pandemics, the critical infrastructures operators were not really thinking about these issues, and also about dynamicity of changes. So what is in the project, what is done already is kind of retro assessment, and we will continue doing it. It's a retrospective analysis, what worked well and what went wrong during the pandemics. For example, it took some time to understand which workers are essential, and then if there are any specific procedures for these workers, for example, like permissions to access. These are threats related to human resources and to workforce. Collaboration issues also. We saw in the previous panel session the number of entities, not only critical entities, but also essential entities, and other where there were no trusted communication channels between these entities. People on the human level, there are some risks, and the people are more vulnerable during pandemics because there is a fear, anxiety. There are a lot more fake news, misinformation, etc. I already mentioned the adoption of new protocols and tools, including QR. This resulted in some new types of threats, like QR phishing, which is a sort of phishing with QR codes, and this also I think has to be included in the new strategy. The quality of predictions. The predictions were usually made even before pandemics, but this quality needs to be improved about the needs and what are the resources that are needed for normal operation. In summary, there are changes in threat landscape. There are changes in impacts. Some for example, assets were considered more important than others during pandemics, etc. This all is fed into the project, and we have in several outcomes in the projects, tools like risk-based access control or remote physical infrastructure inspection. But I will focus in this presentation on cyber physical resilience and tool that is developed in Athos for this purpose. Of course, we have, like any other project, we have collaboration between critical infrastructure, we had awareness, impact creation, etc. Okay, a little bit about project approach. We have 18 critical infrastructure authorities and operators in 8 different countries. We have different type of stakeholders, including experts from social sciences, so not only operators and authorities related to critical infrastructure, but we have also technical people and people who are more interested in research in market research, societal research in the market. The work plan, again, I will not spend much time because this is something that is very specific for this project, but it's just to say that we have a couple of different work packages focusing on tools. So I mentioned 4 tools, and each of these work packages is dealing with one of these tools. Now, the core of this presentation is cyber physical security solutions, and this is where we are coordinating this work package 6 and this development of this tool. So what we propose is to move away from the plan, do, check. I forgot to put here what this acronym means, PDCA, plan, do, check, act, which is a more static approach, and it has been used and is still used in many cybersecurity systems, but also in other security and safety systems, because it is usually you plan, you implement it, check, and then act. And to move towards the observe, orient, decide, act, also known as a Boyd loop. And it is much faster and more appropriate for the situation where there are dynamic changes and adaptations. Continuous adaptations are needed. What we need is to make tools that we already have, to have a contextualization and making sense of the newly arrived data. This means that these 2 phases, observation and orientation, need both of these phases need feedback loop. And in observation, we take outside in. I will in the following slide, I will explain which outside in information we take. These are risk indicators that we take. And in orientation, we take something which is called risk model, and then we work with inside out risk model, but also risk landscape that is specific for critical infrastructure. This part might contain bias, but they are, let's say, complementary. It can work with uncertainties, partial information, because it's a cognitive process based on human knowledge. The incoming data is we are receiving real-time information from cyber systems, for example, from security information event management, from intrusion detection systems, and other type of threat sharing, for example, systems. But we also receive incoming data from the service, from the observation of human behavior, psychological. Based on this data, we estimate probabilities of an attack, or we assess risks. So this is a tool that we came up. This is the architecture of the tool, which is, as I said, reusing some of the existing tools. One of these is a risk assessment engine, which is assessing when triggered. It is assessing automatically risk based on specific risk models. So we already have a whole library of risk models from previous projects, which is focused on cyber risk models. And then we feed this information with real-time information, as well as some of information manually inserted there. Here we also add threat intelligence sharing, and something we call threat scores, which is adaptation of these threats to specific context of critical infrastructure operator. We are trying to build a tool that is working well with probabilities. So we will have in this observation phase, I usually try to explain this with this children's game. When they play, for example, when they put something to hide and they say hot, hot, cold, cold, colder, and as you approach the hidden object, the voice is getting stronger and hot, 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 hotter. So this is the same with observation indicators. We will get indicators with higher probability, which is indicating that we are let's say, observing a higher probability of risk. What is also important here to mention is the feedback loops. I mentioned that there is a one feedback loop to observation to filter, for example, for threat indicators of compromise or threat information that is shared, to have this feedback loop that is adapting this for specific infrastructure. And the second feedback loop is going to the orientation phase, which is correcting cognitive bias, but is also reflecting change of context, like priorities, for example, that you don't care so much about money in the pandemics, but you care not so about monetary impact, but you care about other type of impacts, or you reassess the impact context. A little bit about risk indicators and risk models. So there are different indicators that we plan to extend from the cyber indicators to also inclusion of communication collaboration, human resource risk indicators, for example, screening of contractors, remote worker, supply chain risk indicators, which are previously maybe not taken into account, or not at least in so much like they should be after pandemics. I mentioned already real-time indicators that are coming from the tools, and they are fed in machine-readable format, and they are also received from the tools from other partners like XLab from Slovenia that has artificial intelligence-based vulnerability assessment. Threat score is also based on artificial intelligence, is using a heuristic analysis process that is assessing timeliness of the information that is shared, relevance, accuracy, and actionability. Finally, that we also we want to make adaptation risk models. These risk models are written in two different languages, quantitative and qualitative. They are using R and DEXI languages that to be able to process them automatically, or at least semi-automatically. Okay, so I will finish with conclusions. We have the project just started, so I don't have much to show about pilots or verification of these tools. We are in the phase of the design, so we still very young projects, less than 6 months. But we already have some conclusions that the lessons from pandemics. We have this local workshop where the critical infrastructure operators discuss these lessons, and we have some conclusions from them. For cyber physical security, it is essential to work on detection or identification, but also to narrow down the scope, like threat score and contextualization. So this kind of observation needs to narrow down the scope, and also have this adaptation of the context very fast. We also take into account probabilities, cascading effects. I already mentioned the risk indicators. And then as a conclusion, we designed this architecture of these tools that is integrating different tools and together with incident response while considering the technology, people, and processes. I think this is all from me, so I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alyosha. This was very interesting. And since you're here, are there any questions for him right now? One quick. No, we're all impressed. It was really interesting for me, at least for us, because also AIT is part of Sunrise, and we haven't done much, but we want to. We're happy to work in this as well. And I think we can now, we means Lorcan and me, take this last slide that you showed. You said you want to combine cascading effects and risk indicators, and what we did, it's combining cascading effects and resilience indicators. Maybe it's useful or interesting for you. And we make it short. Because from what I can see in the audience, many people know what it's about. So yeah, we do it a bit quicker once we have the slides. Thank you so much. Yeah, maybe some audio would be good. So in a nutshell, what we wanted to tell you, I mean, we can make it short because those who are in Precinct and or Praetorian, they know about the cascading effect simulation that AIT has been doing. And one crucial part or key part of Precinct is that we combine it with the resilience. So we explicitly take it into account, and we also check how resilience can learn from the simulation. So I spare you the theoretical, maybe this one is for those who are not in Precinct. This is nice. You've seen this graph on Monday from Stefan. It's explaining these interdependencies and that we do not just consider cyber and physical, but we combine. And my point is just, it's not just the dots. So too bad that my colleague is not here now. She has been wondering about how the dots get colored. I could explain her if she's interested. So there is a machinery behind, we can run simulations, long story short. And yeah, long story, almost short, I'm sorry for that. And we also care about resilience, and I give the floor to the expert who knows more about it.
So that's a very quick introduction into how the critical interdependency graph works. As Sandra said, a lot of us are very familiar with it. What we've worked on in Precinct is building the resilience calculation into that graph. So we've talked a lot about resilience. What is resilience in the context of Precinct? Again, a lot of us are familiar with this. Resilience is the ability to continue to provide service if a disruptive event occurs. So that's before, during, and after an event. So the hazard indicated by the red line, as it occurs, our service indicated by the black line decreases, and our resilience is the amount of the service sustained over the course of the hazard. The question is, what is that service? How do we measure it? How do we quantify it? For a transport infrastructure, it might be number of passengers served. For a water supply infrastructure, again, it could be number of users. For electricity supply, it could be availability of the infrastructure, etc. So what we've done with the interdependency graphs in Precinct in order to build the resilience calculation together is we've incorporated these red nodes, which are resilience indicators, and they essentially allow us to have an impact on the infrastructure. They allow us to make changes, to put in place enhancements to make the infrastructure more resilient. So for example, the power network on the top right, we have a failure warning system integrated into it within the graph. The tunnel, we have an indicator for the tunnel, which essentially allows us to model the effect of enhancements to the drainage systems or the sealing of the tunnel. The emergency station on the bottom left, we can make more resources available to provide emergency response. So in order to quantify resilience, we need to quantify the service. The first step in that is deciding what the service is. So for this particular example, for one of the Precinct Living Labs, our service in this case is safety. So it's the safety of the people using that infrastructure. So we have an electricity infrastructure, we have transport, we have water networks, etc. What we're valuing here is the safety of those users. So basically what we've done is we've provided a basic calculation as to what the daily value of the safety of those users is. In this case, on the bottom right, it's 32 million. So that's our baseline service before the disruptive event occurs. Then we run our graph, and the clever people at AIT give us the answer as to what the probability of being in various states are for that particular people node in the graph. So we might be in state 1, where we have 0 injuries or fatalities after the event. We're very, very resilient. Or we might be in state 5, where we have a large number of injuries and fatalities. From that, we calculate the probabilities of being in each of these states, and we calculate the expected value of the losses. Our resilience index then is the original service minus the losses divided by the original service. So it's a percentage indication of how much of the service is lost due to that hazard. We then, once we've quantified that resilience, I mentioned these resilience indicator nodes. So for each of these nodes, for example, we have the condition of the flood protection measures in the tunnel. We have 5 possible states. So maybe in the worst state, we have no flood mitigation and poor sealing of tunnel. In the best state, we have a high level of flood mitigation. We also have the presence of electricity failure warning systems and the availability of emergency resources. So what we do is we quantify what the cost is of enhancing each of those indicators from the worst case to the best case. And then we can also run our simulation for the various different combinations of those enhancements to calculate what the resilience is. So we don't just use resilience to indicate how good a strategy is. We have to build value into it too. So one of our KPIs in Precinct is the return on investment. So we basically model what it's basically the relationship between the resilient service, or the amount of service we retain, divided by the investment that we put in for each strategy. So apologies for flying through this, but the value of this is that we essentially have two measures now which we can use to decide which strategies are effective, both in terms of resilience and return on investment. So we want to get into that sweet spot in the top right-hand corner. So what we wanted to do today was just take you through some very quick examples of this particular living lab. What we've done is we've taken a specific investment budget, which limits the amount of strategies that we're able to undertake. We've run all of these strategies in the background. We've calculated the probability of being in the various states for safety, and we've calculated the resilience. So again, just a quick look at the baseline state. So this table shows the probabilities of being in each state for the people node. And you can see that we have a reasonably high probability of being in the worst state, state 5. The people node is just up from the bottom here, and you can see we have a red node showing that something's going wrong. Many of the nodes feeding into this are also in a bit of trouble. So the emergency station is in red, tunnel is in orange, and the nursing and childcare and hospitals are also in orange. So these states being in a bad situation is impacting the resilience of our people node. We then calculate our baseline resilience index. As we said before, it's 0.62. It's essentially the loss of service over the course of the event. So what we've then done is we've run all the various different intervention strategies that we can take. The graph here is just showing what we mentioned earlier, the return on investment, the resilience index against the return on investment. So we can quickly identify what appears to be a good strategy in terms of value. We have a very good return on investment, but quite a low increase in resilience. Other potentially good strategies, we can enhance the resilience very quickly, and we can see that might appear to be a good strategy, but it doesn't appear to have a lot of value. Obviously, there are some poor strategies which perform badly in terms of resilience and investment, and as well as some middle-of-the-road strategies. So looking at one of these apparently good strategies, so a decent return on investment, turns out to be a situation where we put a very small amount of investment in place. So we basically enhance the failure warning system from 3 to 2, and this gives us a very moderate increase in resilience, but it's quite a quick win in terms of enhancing the resilience, and it gives us a good a strategy that appears to be very good value, at least. So again, here for the same strategy, our investment is 100,000, and our resilient service is 24 million against 31, which again, not a significant saving, but good value. Another good strategy, the one where we have a high resilience and a low return on investment. In this case, we do the same thing. We enhance the failure warning system slightly, but we also put a fair amount of investment into the availability of emergency resources to respond to the extreme event, which in this case is flooding. I'm conscious that this session is resilience in cybersecurity. This particular example is one of our physical examples, but the process is the same. So essentially this allows us to look at this strategy and see why it works. So in this case, you can see that the emergency resources has improved slightly in the graph, and this basically reduces the probability of being in the worst case for the people node to 1%. So it saves us a lot of the service when the disruptive event occurs. So we do have more examples. A bad strategy, again, in this case, is to enhance the tunnel flood protection. It's quite expensive, and it turns out it doesn't have a significant impact on safety. And then finally, we come back to the cascading effects. I don't know if you want to wrap that up.
I just wanted, if I have time, to comment very quickly on this, like 2 minutes. This slide I added because Dora asked yesterday about, like, it would be nice if there is an interface to gather this data. It's not perfect yet. It's getting there. So what we do, it's like if the resilience is 5, it's kind of the worst state, and then you describe in any ways that I or the machine understand what is the reaction, how bad is it for you, and then we go kind of to the next level. Now, if we, according to this definition that Orkan gave before, if we now increase the resilience, how does the reaction now change? So this is the kind of input that we need for these models, and we try to make this more and more understandable for non-technical people or less technical people, for the end users. And then, I mean, we don't see a graph now, but I want maybe for 1 second comment on what has been discussed in the morning about the innovation and about kind of setting things. Of course, this small little graph, it will not be sold, but the actual value that we have in the project, it brings people together and they talk. So usually when we had these kind of models, we could also kind of course, we don't throw them away, but people leave these meetings regularly with, well, we've learned a lot about how others do it, how we actually treat things. So there is some value that you cannot measure in terms of technical results. Good. Now, any questions for any of us?
We can accept questions from Precinct partners as well if there's anything technical we want. I think we made back a little bit of time, although we are happy to move on.
So I would actually like to invite the audience to reflect and take the next 5 minutes to ask questions. The reason is that you've just exposed some of the possibly the most valuable things the Precinct can produce. I know people are very tired, but this is a Precinct conference after all, and I think there's a lot of content that connects a lot of dots. So I will not accept no questions for the next 5 minutes. So, and if there are no questions, I will ask a couple.
So go ahead with nice questions, please.
So I know some of the process because I work with the IT on Praetorian project, but I would like to hear your comment about, so to do this calculation, you need to have the model, you need to have the nodes, and you need to know the connections between the nodes. To get that information, you really have to dig deep and talk to people who work in operations to give you that kind of information. So what was the struggle there? How hard it was to get it? Because that's the crucial part. You need to know the connections between different assets. And as I've noticed, there are several levels of how you can look to asset. An asset could be one computer, or it can be a nursing infrastructure. So there are different layers of what an asset, their node can be, and these. I think you understood the question. So
I think I have two answers. So the discussion about what is a node or what should be represented actually in the graph, it depends on the scenario that we want to analyze. So that's why I think actually it's a good comparison between Praetorian and Precinct. For Praetorian, we had not as much discussions with the end users as in Precinct. And then basically what we did was just following the scenario, and whatever was mentioned was introduced in a model. And if it is important for the considered scenario, if there is an attack, we do need the server. It's crucial. If we talk about the flooding, maybe the server is less important. So they are pretty scenario driven, unless we want to include everything, but then we will never end. It's highly time consuming. And the other comment, it's like, maybe the other view. So in Precinct, we really did more than one workshop with all the partners. And it was really like intense, but productive. So, and again, the main output of these discussions and workshops, I mean, we do have a lot of living partners here. You can feel to ask them. I felt the main value was really bring these people together and discuss this one scenario. And then every now and then someone said, this is a threat, and I was not aware that you do this. And so the information gain was really good, I hope. don't tell me otherwise. But it was really a fruitful discussion, not just for me collecting data, but for all of us. And if we plan the next project, it would be good to reserve some time for that data gathering and information exchange, building trust, as we said yesterday. Yes, that.
Yes, Sandra, from the perspective of the living labs or end users, you are completely right. I think that the technology is the sticky point for the discussion, trust building, and of course, with this discussion, we probably saw something, behind, which we forgot in everyday operational life, or that we see just our organization. The really excellent thing of PRECINCT is this interdependency and connections between different critical infrastructures. And of course, this technology is a sticky point in this sense. Thank you.
Happy to hear. Anyone else? Dora?
Yeah, we are also partners, and we are part of the Living Lab. And I fully support your statement that this was the chance to talk together, not only among infrastructure, critical infrastructure, but also involving the stakeholders. Obviously, each of them bring interests which are not always, it is not always possible to combine. But working together on the scenario, it was possible to evaluate each position and find a balanced approach to the objective. So yeah, discussing together at the same table with different perspective pushed us to focus on it.
I have two questions. And one is for you, Sandra, the other one is for you, Lorcan. And they are opportunity questions. They are not. So Sandra, what is the difference between this interconnection graphs you show and a digital twin of the ensemble of the critical infrastructures?
I can't remember how many discussions we had about that. And I'm not sure if there is an agreement right now. Let me say the interdependency graph, it's one part of the digital twin, or like maybe it's not even showing all the time, but it's kind of background information, kind of the basis on which it's built. And we are still discussing today how to build the digital twin then out of this.
I love your answer, but that actually would point to maybe an invitation to sell a bit better the work that you're doing, because essentially when people talk about digital twins of interconnected critical infrastructures, essentially without doing the groundwork that you explored and that you actually mentioned, there's not going to be a digital twin. So it starts. It's a bit more than creating discussions with people, as I understand.
Well, I think I'm too modest to claim that it's not possible without us. No, it's one way of doing it, I would say. So because we understand the interdependencies, we can simulate the cascading effects and everything. And so it's neither is included in the other. So we can do this work and we have analytical results that we can give to the end users with or without the digital twin. And the digital twin can use our interdependency graph and the simulation to learn and to build the digital twin, but I'm very sure that you can do it otherwise as well. But if you have it, it would be good to use the knowledge.
Thank you. I have a question for Lorcan. Actually, it's a question to the audience via your presentation, but could you show the ROI definition? Now the question to the audience is, what does the ROI measure?
So I can give you some help, but Cristiano.
Well, in our understanding, the ROI is a measure of something you are never going to measure, because actually it would be the amount of money that you're going to lose after you have done all the restoration that are needed in order to come back from a critical situation that has happened. So it's based, in my understanding, on an estimate of such an effect. And therefore, it is a volatile measure of the project, but it is actually what it makes the project counting.
It's really interesting, because I think there is another dimension missing from the graph that I showed. You know, it's intended to give a measure of value. We have a potential for the service to increase when we put in place the investment, and that's built into it. It's intended to give a measure of value at the same time as resilience. Another very important measure is how much is it going to cost up front. We've had a lot of discussion on directives, on regulations, on the different reasons that stakeholders are going to have to put these kind of things in place. What this gives is a justification for the various different investments that you can make. The scenario that we've presented, where we have a pot of money and we need to know how to spend that best, is rarely the scenario that you deal with in reality. So we want a structure to provide those different dimensions, to give them all voice when putting in place enhancements to resilience.
Can I offer another summary? So the ROI is how much resilience does money buys you? And it's predicated on the assumptions that resilience, as defined by very clearly, I think, by Lorcan, the resilience index is how much service, it's the service that you can provide in the face of a threat attack that's been underway. So this is actually not this is based on the idea that people value resilience.
I'm not sure about that actually, because we are not able. What if we think in terms of insurance of this value? Let's say, how much are you willing to pay in order to avoid that critical situation? And if that critical situation happens, then you get that amount back. It's not an accession, it's just a question.
I'm not sure if you want to respond, Giovanni, or if we can move on, but sure.
So, first of all, I want to thank again all the speakers, and I would like to invite all the PRECINCT partners to actually read the deliverable that Lorcan and other colleagues put together, where the RI is defined, the ROI is defined, and to think about what it means. And then we can have a conversation about this, because this is about metrics. And metrics are, they can help discussions, but at least we need to start with the same understanding, and they're defined. So it's not a point, how they're defined, it's not a point of discussion. How we use them, how we communicate them, it's another point. And please look at that, and we're happy to have a conversation as well with this. I'd like to invite the last, I think, we're getting close to the end of the conference, and I have to say I'm a bit tired. And we have again the most prolific contributor to the entire conference. So thank you again for being here. And Erkuden is going to talk to us about the dynamic project. And yeah, I don't know if you can keep it to at the time. There will be 20 minutes would be great. Thank you.
20 minutes is too much, I think. Hello again. I didn't say when I came. Thank you very much for inviting me. I didn't say, but I'm very, very happy to be here today and yesterday as well. And I think it's this kind of workshops are very interesting for the European researchers, because we share a lot of information and also technical approaches. Know how it was super interesting, the validation that Praetorian project did in the use case in this breakout session of yesterday that I attended. Today, the presentation about Sunrise, all the presentation about how PRECINCT also has worked with this resilience, which is very, very important for Dynamic in order not to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so this is very, very important to really build solutions on top of the results of others. No. So Dynamic is an Horizon Europe project that started in December, which is a very short month, so more or less it started in January. Because we were already doing these contracts and all this stuff in December. So Dynamic is about business continuity and response of critical systems against advanced cyber-physical threats. So the focus of Dynamic is not so much about crisis management, and we do not have first responders as in PRECINCT. What we arrive at the layer of cyber-physical threats and cyber-physical risk. With the risk assessment that we do are risks about these disruptions in business continuity, so risks about keeping or not the resilience level that is the target level, but it's more related to cyber attacks, okay? So cyber physical attacks. We have some simulators there and the digital twin to be built. So Dynamic it's a consortium of 16 partners, and we have partners and users like Ferrovial in Spain, but the use case of Ferrovial will be in Portugal with one affiliated entity of Ferrovial in Portugal. We were the critical infrastructure there is a big tunnel and a road associated to it, which is one of the main road backbones of Portugal, also connecting Portugal with Spain. Then we have the end user, the PPC, the power supplier in Greece, the main power supplier there, and also the hospital in Portugal, the Espírito Santo, okay? All of them, they have test beds, which are what we call the physical twins, okay? We call physical twins to the test beds, and then instead of living labs as in PRECINCT, and then we have the digital twins to be built on top of them. The project lasts 3 years, so it will be until November 2025. The strategic goal is to increase the resilience of the European critical infrastructures as the big goal, okay? But the focus is on cyber-physical threats and simulating these cyber-physical threats and modeling them in the digital twin to calculate and do forecasting of business disruptions and how these disruptions, how these incidents and attacks may affect other critical infrastructures as well. More or less the same line that Praetorian and PRECINCT followed. Our approach is in this DevOps Adapt cycle, which is about adapting and self-healing the system as much as possible by self-observation and also context observation. In fact, the logo of Dynamic was very similar to this cycle, and it's very similar. It was very similar to PRECINCT logo. With these colors, so we changed it. Okay, we changed it during the project in order to really differentiate from the others, and because the logo quality needed to be enhanced. But it's funny that the logo was very similar, even if I didn't really notice the PRECINCT logo before. So this DevOps Adapt cycle, it's about, DevOps part, no? DevOps cycle very for software engineering that ensures that operations and development side of the system are very connected, and you can do really good feedback and agile feedback from operations and situation in operation to modify the design as soon as possible. So the idea is also to enrich the ops part with this adaptation and do this reaction as much as possible. So apart from incident notification or incident reporting, what Dynamic seeks is to try to evolve the system as soon as possible. No, so for this we rely on the risks assessments, dynamic risk assessments that we are going to offer in the solution. The first objective is to create a dynamic framework, what we call dynamic framework. The operators in the objective 2, the operators of essential services that now are for dynamic will be these essential entities in this directive 2. They need to really be able to assess in real time the business continuity risks and the cascading effects. So the idea is to provide as much as possible these risk calculations and simulation of different incidents to be able to adapt the system as soon as possible and with good mitigation strategies. And then we are going to do the part about disaster preparedness and prevention. It's more about this detection of the context and detection of the system state in an early way. And then this autonomous adaptation is about, okay, let's use the digital twin to feed back to the physical twin as much as possible, and then replace the physical twin with the real system, so the digital twin could be connected directly to the real system. So the idea is to prepare digital twins that can be later just plugged to the real system. Then with this, of course, vulnerability and threat information sharing part, it's a very important part in the project, because we need to now fulfill the NIST Directive 2. And the demonstration, it's, as I said, in 4. In this one, I missed, but we have also the Oro in Romania, Orange partner, the telco partner, which has a 5G lab based on SDN as well. So, okay, I will not repeat myself. I bring here the concept about this multi-aspect digital twin, which is more or less similar to the approaches that you have used in PRECINCT and in Praetorian. What we model, what we capture in the digital twin are different perspectives of the system and the context where the environment where the system is working. So we are going to produce abstractions of the different parts of the system. And these abstractions are aspects, what we call aspects. In the project, we are currently defining how many of them do we need, what each of the abstractions will model and will capture, and how they are interconnected to one another. We are currently defining that, and for that we are studying all the use cases in order to understand what type of possibilities are there, because the network topology and deployment, all this infrastructure part is more or less easy to get, let's say, but the rest are not so easy, because usually the system operators or even the companies, they do not have such kind of models, or they do not store such kind of information about the systems. So you cannot compute anything if the information is not really collected in a systematic way, let's say. So this is more or less in a very easily to understand, I think, figure what is dynamic providing. We are providing a part for prevention and detection of the cyber incidents and cyber threats. So this is more about system sensors and detection there of the incidents and the effects in the environments. Then we have the part about real-time business continuity risk management, which is a tool that is computing at qualitative level and quantitative level the effects and these probabilities of the event really happening according to the states captured in the system. And then the part about the response. No, the challenge here is to really synchronize well the physical twin with the digital twin and be able to prepare all responses, not to be able only to deploy them in the physical twin, but also in the real system once the physical twin needs to be removed and the solution plugged to the real system. And there are these four critical infrastructures there, and of course the risks assessment will also assess the cascading effects, no? The risks of cascading events between these critical infrastructures. And the idea is the risk management tool is going to be developed by BeAware, which has already been working in risk assessment and risk management in previous European projects. They are a spin-off startup that started some years ago from SIA Technologies in the US, and now they are located in Spain. And these guys, they also they do risk assessment, not only as cyber risk assessment, but also other business risks assessment. No? So the idea is to try at least at the domain of the risks analysis to do it how the cyber physical risks can affect other business risks. No? But all this simulation of incidents and simulation of cyber threats are what we are really simulating are this kind of effects in the system, not so much hazards or floods, these kind of things. We are not simulating them. What we are going to simulate is the effect in the system of these things. No? And we are just starting. Let's say we are in the conceptualization and trying to produce the high-level design of the multi-aspect digital twin and all the solution, all the services around that. In November, we will have all this initial architecture defined with all the initial design of all the components. In December next year, we are going to have the integrated and validated version of the solution. And in November, in 2 years' time, we are going to have the second version validated already in the project. And that's all. I wanted to be not very, if you, connecting what has been described about this resilience and all these parts about cascading effects and so on, of course, it will be very interesting to meet with you again, with Praetorian people and with PRECINCT people that have been studying these things, because I am involved technically as well in the research about this risk assessment. My PhD, one of the parts of my PhD was about risk assessment in multi-cloud. And when you deal with cascading effects, there is a critical infrastructure or part of it affecting the part of another critical infrastructure, and then this effect may also go back again to the other one. No? So loops can happen, and it's not easy to really understand well when you should just stop the computation about the loop not going there forever and so on. No? There are a lot of research, interesting research challenges there. Also, qualitative risk assessment is not easy because you need to trust the values of the probabilities given by the operators of particular events happening, or even values of the impacts, effects that this particular event may have in the system or in this particular asset of the system and so on. You need you can compute anything, but the thing is that you need to base your computations in really well good data or good numbers that operators need to provide in order, but they need to be experienced operators in order to be the data to be trustworthy, no? And really reflect the reality. And this is the most difficult part. And in fact, the critical infrastructures, they are not prepared. They do not record many data that they could record, they could store a lot of data, and they are not doing it right now. No? As we talked yesterday, there are some very good systems that they have for controlling the status of the critical infrastructure, controlling the network, and so on. But they are not recording. They are not recording many of that information. But they should ask their providers to please update the tool to be able to store logs and store all the process and changes in the status of the tool and so on. In order, we could do real good research on that and help them to automate the things as much as possible. So that's the comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I did not hear questions, but I assumed there were no questions to the last speaker. It's been a long day and a half. It's very challenging to draw a lot of general conclusions on the fly. This morning, there were a lot of inputs on the topics of how do we make an impact after the end of not just PRECINCT, but other European projects. I think one of the points we can all take home is actually it's good not to reinvent wheels and as much as possible learn from one another. We had the opportunity to have a dialogue with elements of our sponsors at the level of the DGs, which is actually a sign of attention and interest. And also yesterday as well. So from my side, there are a lot of learnings. I'm still digesting quite a few of them. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be here with you. I wanted to thank again all of you, especially I know online it's very hard to follow this kind of proceedings, and also, you know, in a hybrid event defined as a physical and online event, it's actually easier for people that are present in real life to interact with one another. And so again, a special thanks also for all of you online that have been following. I wanted to thank again all the speakers, today's and yesterday's, of course. I want to thank the organizers. So again, a big applause for EOS, for the organization. And again, I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to be here. PRECINCT is closing relatively soon. I know a lot of you still have a lot of technical work to deliver, but the reality is that we are beginning to close the project, and I hope there will be other occasions to work with you in, well, of course, in this project as it continues, and in others, as I hope we will have. And to all of you, I wish you safe travels. I'd like to conclude the conference so you can all reach your destination as soon as possible. Thank you very much.